I believe we're going to start with an update on school closings and reopenings in response to COVID-19. Ben, are you starting with that?
Yes. I'm sorry, thrown by the no consent agenda. And I appreciate you starting right on time. Let me just pull up the document here. We're going to go pretty quickly to Dr. Wordham, Dr. Gittins, and Ms. Miller to give us an update on the planning for next year. And then I'll have further updates on related to budget and other staffing questions that are going on. But I think at this point we can jump in with the planning for next year. I will talk about two things first, just to sort of set the scene, which these folks will go into more and more. One is there's some loud cracking noises. I'm not sure what that is, but someone could, maybe Robin, if you mute folks, that might be helpful. So we've been busy planning for next year and making quite a few steps on that. I want to remind folks as we get going that this is an initial draft, really an update on the planning, really. I'm hesitant to call it initial draft plan because I don't think we're there yet. Just today, we're expecting this week to get from the Commissioner of Education the initial draft guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We are hoping to get it earlier this week. He said mid to late week. He's having a call with superintendents tomorrow, and then I'm not sure if that means that we get the guidance tomorrow or the weekend or Monday. But a number of things, the plans we're working on now will change because of that. We are certain, and also as you all know, we will get further information from health experts, from the advisory panels, from the work from our internal groups, from working with the union. So this is really meant to be sort of an update on where we are, and we'll give you quite a bit of detailed information, but then a reminder that we'll continue on throughout the course of the summer to improve, strengthen, provide more detail, and then come up with a final approach. I don't have much more to say that. Casey, are you going to present? Great.
Actually, I'm going to start, Ben.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you, Khalees. Great.
No problem. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. I'm Dr. Khalees Warren. I'm the Senior Director of Educational Equity. I have been working closely with Dr. Gittins and Casey Miller, working on the fall planning. And tonight we're here just to give you an update of where we are. As you know, don't need to rehash. We are where we are. The state is where they are because of COVID-19, and we have been really at the 64,000 view, thinking about how can we do schools. And we quickly, and tonight we're going to show you what it kind of looks like at about 5,000 feet high. All right. Good. Can you advance the slide, please, Ben? Thank you. We developed 3 multiple disciplinary groups. The high school BHS has groups running simultaneously. Our groups are pre-K through high school as well, members on these groups. We divided into 3 groups. My team is looking at operations. So we look logistically, how do we do things? We spent a lot of time just talking about arrival. What do we need for arrival? How that's going to look. Dr. Gittins spent time working on teaching and learning, and we're going to share some of those ideas with you as well tonight. And Casey Miller and her team looked at health and safety. And we're saying, I want to be clear that we're giving you the 5,000-foot view because, as Ben said just a moment ago, that we really are waiting on the commissioner to give us descriptive information. And usually he gives us guidelines, but he has been very clear in saying over and over again that we're going to get some prescriptive guidelines of how we are to do school next year. And so we're going to share with you what we've been talking about thus far. In addition to that, Casey, Nicole, and I have been meeting in conjunction with the BEU Joint Labor Management Group. They are also running 3 teams that look at how do we open schools next year. it was important that we are not reinventing the wheel and that one group isn't getting too far ahead of the other. And so we, the three of us, meet before and after our meetings. And then we also have met with the BEU team on a regular basis, keeping them updated, kind of hearing where they are, making sure that their mission for this is in line with ours. That's really key if we're going to make things a little more closely. And then also, as you know, that there are the school committee advisory panels. We found it helpful to develop a list of questions so that we couldn't get too bogged down on and that we didn't know the answers to that we're using with these advisory panels. I sat on one and Casey sat on one the other day as well and found them helpful to use. And so we really thank the community members that have volunteered their time to be a part of that group. So we're going to keep going and give you a bit more. But again, this is to give you some insight into where we are thus far. Casey, would you like to go to slide 3?
Sure. Thank you, Khalees. Superintendent Lemons mentioned this week we do expect some draft guidance coming from the Commissioner of Education. Just a note here, we've been working on these slides all week that as of today, we have not yet received the guidance, but previous calls with the Commissioner signaled that we should expect some more prescriptive guidance, which is different in the past, where we will see a more rigorous approach to remote learning. He did signal that schools should be prepared for different options, and in particular, a hybrid option, however, with more direction for districts to build in that flexibility so that when and if we need to move along the continuum of school closure and full reopening, we're able to do that, which of course makes planning a little bit more difficult, but we essentially have to plan for all scenarios. There will be more refined guidance coming in July, which is later than we would like, but we can't control that timeline with DESE, but just wanted to let the committee know where we are in terms of what we're operating with coming from DESE. I don't know if Dr. Gittens is here.
Yes.
Okay, great, to speak to the beliefs.
So one of the things that we are working on is narrowing and focusing our curriculum, recognizing that we likely won't have a full year's worth of school time to work on all of the materials and items that we, units and lessons that we normally do. And so we are working, the coordinators are working on building everything that we have around these guiding beliefs that all students should have access to culturally responsive grade level curriculum so that they can have equitable outcomes. We should monitor student learning, provide consistent feedback, adjust instruction so that students can successfully engage in grade level curriculum, that all students will achieve at high levels if they're provided with academic, social, emotional, and behavioral health supports, and have strong relationships with the adults in their schools. Next slide. That authentic curriculum will allow students to transfer skills and knowledge beyond the classroom. Student voice, reflection, feedback, and feedback will encourage students to be more engaged in their own learning process. And that learning that's relevant to students' lives will nurture student identity, leading them to be intrinsically motivated and see themselves as valued contributors to a global community. And this is what should be happening in any environment, but we really want to make sure that as we start to narrow and focus curriculum, that we are tying ourselves back to these beliefs, and really being mindful about continuing to do those things that we really believe are important in person or remotely, and so that we're always thinking about these things as we start to develop curriculum and instructional practices that we believe will support the success of all students.
So in our multidisciplinary group meetings, we aligned on these common beliefs and then also set some priorities to ensure that we always had sort of North Stars to go back to. They're listed here. I won't read them all, as I'm sure you can scan these, but what I want to highlight here is early on when we went fully remote, it became clear to us that there were differences and discrepancies across the district in the amount of work, in the level of work within grades and between schools. And what we want to ensure is a level of consistency so that if you are a Driscoll student, your education is going to look the same as your counterpart at Lawrence. We want to ensure that a Brookline education is a Brookline education regardless of what school that you are in. And that really gets to the equity piece and the consistency in providing high quality learning for our students. So that was key for us. And it relates to all of these bullets here. I'll pass it off to Erin Cooley, who will talk a bit about how we use this data to inform our work too.
Thanks, Casey. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Cooley. I'm the Director of Data Analysis and Information Management. I haven't met some of you, so hello. I presented the results of our family remote learning survey to the ad hoc remote learning task force a couple of weeks ago. And we wanted to make sure that not only were the voices of these different planning groups heard when we're thinking about reopening for next year, but obviously the voices of our parents and guardians as well. So I'm just going to go through a couple of slides that outline some of the things that families have been saying have been going really well during remote learning, and then some challenges that all of the planning groups have taken into account and will continue to take into account as we get the recommendations or guidance from the state and keep planning for the fall moving forward. So just to go through, our response rate across the district for this survey was 30%, and that's actually pretty high. When we look at our family survey from Panorama that we give out over the last 4 years, that average response rate was around 23%. So we're getting a little bit more in terms of responses for this survey this past spring. And then the majority of families, actually the high majority, are indicating that their students have some sort of structure or schedule, that they can access the work being provided by their teachers, which is always really important, obviously, that students are completing the work, and that about 50% of teachers are always checking in with their child each week. But I don't know who's advancing the slides, but you can go to the next one. Here are some challenges that the community voiced, or the parent community voiced, and no surprise, I'm sure, to all of you listening. The majority of families indicated that the amount of in-person teacher time that students were receiving was just not enough, that students were completing more than 8 hours per week on average outside of the in-person or peer-to-peer interactions, and that about half of the respondents indicated that their child needed some sort of adult supervision or help to access or to complete work being provided by teachers. And then finally, special education families, about half of them responded that the activities their children were receiving didn't feel, only felt somewhat or not at all appropriate to meeting their IEP goals. And then what I wanted to also do for you here, instead of just kind of spewing out percents, I wanted to give you a sample of actual responses from parents that we received. So we gave out three open response questions. One, what is working well with remote learning? What do you feel is working well with remote learning? And what has been a challenge? And I've highlighted a handful of them here. Around what's working well. And, these are only highlights, but these are things or responses or themes that came up a lot when I was looking at all of the open response results. So the first thing I put on there, and I think is really important, obviously, is that teachers and principals care a lot It was really obvious in the open responses that, people are feeling overwhelmed, but they know that everyone's doing the best that they can. Secondly, things like Google Classroom and Canvas and Seesaw were all technology systems that families felt were really helpful. They also felt getting the whole class together at once, so really that interaction with peers and with their teacher was really helpful and working really well, as well as recorded lessons that teachers had been sending. Next slide. And then finally, what has been challenging. So again, these are a sample of responses, actual responses from respondents, but the themes on this slide kind of reoccurred throughout the responses when I was looking at them. So it's really hard for elementary age students in a large group online setting. So when there's 15 plus students on an elementary Zoom, for example, families wish they had more face-to-face class meetings, felt there was minimal new learning and not enough academic rigor or consistency across teachers. I talked about the adult supervision earlier. Some students are lacking a little bit of motivation, not having that, one-on-one or even 1 to 5, whatever, attention in person. And then finally, a lot of parents were concerned about the peer interactions, them being too minimal during this closing.
So what we'll share next is some more details in terms of what the hybrid model will look like. I want to stress that these are not fully baked recommendations, but certainly have had a lot of educator time and thinking around putting some meat on these bones.
So we developed the grid, and these are some of the things that we started. Clearly, we have, if we're going to go to the next level, we have to have answers to. Some of them were more questions that we had to raise and find answers to as well. So we have to have a consistent scheduling. It is for us, everyone on the in the teams realize that there has to be a predictability with this, and developing a schedule that would work and publicize that, make sure that everyone is known about that. We talked, and so I actually don't need to read the boxes to you, but if you would take a moment just to kind of scan the overall view of the hybrid model, these are the things that we are beginning our deep dive into each. And so we've talked about each topic here at some level. Some are more developed than others. And clearly this isn't all, but this is the beginning of how we're putting detail to our plan for a hybrid model. Dr. Gittens, are you answering school schedule?
Oh, yeah, I am, but I thought people were still reading that slide.
I'm sorry, but then he advanced the slide, so.
Can you go back? I think maybe people need some more time.
Sure, no problem.
Sorry. Thank you.
And we'll make these slides available to the community, of course. Okay.
All right. So as Dr. Warnham was saying, we do recognize that we need to have a consistent, predictable schedule for each day. And they may vary day to day so that we are addressing the needs of multiple, recognizing that the needs may change, especially in a remote world. And so really making sure that families are aware of what times things are supposed to happen, when will synchronous opportunities happen, and how they can engage in that as far as, in person and remotely, thinking about when we schedule specials, special education and EL services. And then thinking about how we do maintain a fully remote academy for specific populations who are unable to return to school and then also daily on-site for specific populations, especially our families who don't have choices or the resource to, if they are having to be at work, if they're essential workers and don't have the resources in order to have support at home, how do we make sure that we are being mindful of select populations who may have to be in school every day?
And I just want to add on before we go to the next slide with regard to the fully remote option or service, I should say, that the teams recognize that a lot of the data that we're seeing nationwide is there are families who are electing, for whatever reason, not to have their students return to the school buildings in the fall. And we know that that is our obligation to also have an educational program for those students too.
We talked about those families who have immunocompromised children or even siblings of those family members who maybe have some health challenges and concerns, and they're concerned about a whole group of family members and not just about the particular student who may face health challenges. For curriculum and instruction, again, we're looking at a modified curriculum, much like what you saw come out of, for April, May, and June this year, that will have a focus on endurance. So we're looking at the skills and knowledge that students need for lifelong learning, what skills and knowledge that are foundational for other learning opportunities, and then readiness for the next grade level. We also want to make sure that families have information about units and lessons. How do we make sure that families know if they are supporting students, what is important to focus on about how much time students should spend on particular lessons or units. Support in how to use the tech platforms. We have heard from families that, and from teachers that during some of the lessons that they were spending time teaching families how to use the technology. And so it's important that we think about providing opportunities for families to learn how to use technology outside of the instructional period, and provide drop-in support for families around, challenges with curriculum and with technology. And then a district-wide common learning expectations by grade level. Again, we heard that from families, and we saw that in the survey, that there just seemed to be way too many differences from school to school, from classroom to classroom. And so really trying to nail down what our common learning expectations by grade level, so that there is less variability in what students have access to learn. And then what is also important is ongoing professional development. And so we will do professional development this summer, but we also need to be thinking about how we have an ongoing professional development opportunities for folks to check in on curriculum, support with lesson plans, and support with engaging students in the best instructional practices for remote learning. We're also really being mindful of the fact that we don't want students to have, or families or staff to have whiplash experiences. So if we are in person and then have to be completely remote, or if there is recommendations from the state that we do week on, week off, that as you transition back and forth from remote to school, that it's not a jerky experience, and that there is a consistency in what students are expected to learn and the materials that we are using with students, so that we're not having to reset ourselves with every change that is made. Next slide.
So we also recognize that you can have the best designed curricula set up to go, but if we, after a pandemic this long, are not prepared to mentally prepare our students, staff and families to come back to whatever this new normal will look like, students won't access that teaching, right? And so a small group of the team that I led spent a lot of time thinking through how we will prepare for the heightened levels of anxiety, potential school avoidance behaviors, and for sure for staff and students, what type of trauma we will see and how will that inform our teaching practices. The information that we get in terms of assessing where staff and students are in terms of comfort level, and in particular for students and their mental health needs, will give us a lot of information in terms of how we begin to build those social emotional learning competencies, such as self-awareness, social awareness, self-management, responsibility, responsible decision-making, and relationship skill building. And it's important that we think about all the students from our youngest kiddos at BEEP through our oldest students at the high school. Our team talked through the different tools that we would need in order to assess where our students' mental health needs are. Here's a sample of what we would like to see is a survey to all of the families to get a better understanding of where their children are from the parents and guardian perspectives, and if there are any immediate needs that we could meet, we could plan for those. For students in 3rd to 12th grade, how do we better understand what they need in order to best learn? How do we help them still, even from a remote setting, develop all the right habits to be an effective student? And then, of course, how can we best teach social emotional learning competencies? And from our staff, we want to better understand their personal and professional needs. Again, with whatever our new normal is, we also want to ensure psychological safety for staff because, you know, for many of us, we really haven't been full-time in the school building since March 13th. What does collaboration look like among staff? How are staff feeling about engaging with students again? And then where are we with family communication and staff? For, you know, a majority of the students, they will be with new teachers in the fall. And so the next steps are thinking about survey, we teach our students, we monitor their progress, and then it's repeat, right? So best practice tells you that this is the cycle that you should be in over the course of the school year. Getting this information through survey results would allow teachers, principals, guidance counselors, child study teams to group depending on the needs. So an example would be if we're able to survey all 2nd grade students at Lincoln, and we see that 40% of 2nd graders are lacking a particular skill, then those 2nd grade teachers can co-plan lessons that would address teaching this particular skill, which gets at this targeted intervention piece. And then, of course, progress monitoring throughout the year to see where students are, especially if we have to shift from a hybrid model to a fully remote model, and hopefully at some point during the school year, a fully in model where everybody is back in the buildings. So that's a little bit in terms of the thinking that the teams have done already with regard to building social emotional competencies and also assessing where students are and planning the planning that needs to get done to ensure psychological safety for the adults and the children in the buildings. I want to cover a little bit in terms of what communication should look like from the district moving forward. Communication really should be regular. You know, everything that we see in terms of advice for times like these is to over communicate even when you don't have anything really substantial to communicate, to let folks know you're still there, you're still thinking about them, you're still thinking about the work. So we intend to do that. My next slide will present a timeline to give the committee an idea of what, you know, of how we're breaking down the work with regard to the next couple of months. We are working on a draft initial communication, really an overview of our presentation tonight to send out to all families and have that also be available on the PSB website. And then there's also a town COVID site if we can take up a little bit of internet space there. We have seen that in some other towns. The superintendent has been invited to town meetings to provide an update, given that there are so many residents that attend and are a part of town meetings. I wanted to put that there. We wanted to put that there in case that is a good way to also get information out with regard to reopening in the fall. Here's a draft timeline. And again, it really depends on what DESE drops on us, but we don't have that many months to work with. So it's really about, do we do it earlier in June, sooner than later, really, but we're looking at June, July, and August. We do want to continue to schedule to work with the multidisciplinary groups. We've gotten an overwhelming level of interest of folks to continue because they're invested in ensuring that school opens successfully next year in whatever fashion. We want to continue providing that PD that Nicole talked about, planning for developing curricula for next year, depending what the departments of public health, both Brookline and the state and DESE come out with. We will continue to refine our plan and, of course, continue to update the community on that. We're imagining the development of a field guide, essentially, that has all of the new policies and procedures that Khalees spoke to with that table that lists out all the new health and safety protocols and just other policies and procedures that we would need to put in place to ensure health and safety for students. We are also in the process of developing educational materials so folks know what it's like and get a preview of what lunch will look like, what the classrooms will look like, what the school entry procedures will be. We will also expect that families have a list of questions and things to check before they send a student to school. Most of those obviously would be a health check with regard to temperature, things like that. We have to continue ordering our safety supplies and, of course, materials so that we can open our buildings. We'll continue to collaborate with the planning groups that we listed earlier on in our presentation. Mid to late summer, we will, be nimble and reassess all the things above as we go. Next steps in terms of summer work, and by that I mean paying the folks to continue the planning and thinking work. We had discussions with Mary Ellen Norman about this. We did apply for the CARES Act funding. We have the application is in. We have not yet heard whether or not it's been approved, but we did put in a substantial amount of money to allow for this to happen, for us to pay staff over the summer to continue this work. We will be looking to you, the committee, and also statewide in terms of what other funding sources might be coming our way. And then lastly, what the agreements need to look like with our union partners in terms of providing more clarity and expectations for roles that may need to look a little bit different, given that we do have to build in flexibility for movement along the continuum of reopening models. All of our jobs will have to look a little different. And where is that latitude, and where may we need agreement with the union for that? I am going to stop sharing my screen, but would love to take any questions, any of us.
So if I can just jump in. So thank you very much. We understand that this is certainly in the planning stages, that they'll change many times. And knowing that we have a lot to cover tonight, what I'd like to do is ask each committee member to make a comment, ask a question, and then move on and let another committee member speak and see if we can't get through all the committee members and then see where we are. So we'll start off, everyone can make a question, ask a question, make a comment. We'll go one by one, and then we'll see how we're doing. Jennifer, did you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks for putting all this together. It's a good sort of entry plan, and it helps me to understand where everyone is in the planning process. I just had a quick question about the surveys. When would we anticipate trying to get those out for? Is there a timeline or a plan for the surveys to families, students, and educators? Just trying to think about what our return might be now versus in the middle of the summer. I didn't know if there was any sort of thought or plan about that.
So let me just jump in there. What we need to do is not just give a general survey, but actually give a survey that is laying out more specific options, more specific detail. So, and the timing here is a problem, as you've identified. But giving a sort of a generic, general options there won't be actually very instructive, both to families in terms of learning what may be possible, but also for us in terms of getting real important data. So we do feel like we have to wait till we have the commissioner's, the Department of Education's guidance, and then revise what we have here, and then from that basis with a little more detail, and be able to survey folks, staff, as you said, staff, families, and the like.
Yeah, that sounds really reasonable. Do you think maybe we could send out a letter to families and educators just letting them know that we're hoping when we have that ready to release a survey this summer so that they can keep an eye out for it? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a super idea. Yeah, we'll communicate before the end of the school year, probably on Monday, just to give people an update on this, and also just a closing message, and that looks towards the fall. And that's a good idea. We'll make sure we mention it in that. Thank you. Casey or Nicole or Aaron, can you guys just make sure that we get that idea down and incorporate it into the draft, please? Thank you.
Yep.
Who else would like to make a comment, ask a question? Barbara?
Is it our expectation that, with the exception of the families who do not want their children back in school, that all of the children in Brookline will be attending school this fall? Maybe some one day and some the other day. I'm not asking in terms of schedule, but do we anticipate that every child except those whose families do not want them to come back to school will be in school?
Yeah, that is the expectation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ellen, and then Mariah.
So it's just a quick question. Thank you, by the way, for the presentation. I'm wondering how much you've been talking with your counterparts in other districts and what they're doing, where they are at. And I thought the commissioner was supposed to have something out yesterday. So those are two questions, actually, not one.
I'll answer the first one, then the group can answer the second one. The commissioner was very clear last week. He said, hopefully on Wednesday, likely a little bit later. So, and he was also very clear that, in terms of working, they have a multitude of advisory groups as well. And so anyway, he gave himself some wiggle room. And so that's what we're experiencing. And then, I don't know if Khalees or Nicole or Casey, if you can take the second question without the question.
Can you restate the question, Helen?
I was just wondering how much you were speaking with your counterparts in other EDCO districts or other districts, just to see what they're doing and where they are at in the process.
I've talked to some folks in other districts. I've talked to 3 people, outside of like an organized structure. And they are doing much of what we are doing. I think they're in a different place with curriculum because they have more of a common curriculum, but they are looking at cutting things down and cutting what would be what is expected. But the thing that everyone is in agreement around is that there does have to be some set schedule. And some consistent experience for students. And so folks are in that place.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Helen, we have been reaching out to our counterparts in surrounding towns, but it's not just Khalees, Nicole, and I, but Tricia Laham has been talking to nurse leaders across the, eastern side of Massachusetts, as I'm sure you know, Regina's reached out to districts that have early ed programs, curriculum coordinators, psychologists. Lucky for us, the president-elect for the Mass Association for School Psychologists works in our district, Matt Dubois. So he has access to all the state's school psychs, Maria guidance. So we have been touching base, and we've also been sharing any documents that we've created too. A lot of folks obviously haven't gotten down to that part, but I suspect within the next couple of months, we'll see more of that. It's hard without that state guidance,
Yeah, no, I fully understand and appreciate that. I mean, you're sort of working in the blind. I mean, what if he says, no, everybody has to be in school half day yes and half day no, I mean, so that's very difficult. And I can feel for you when you're trying to plan something that without a base that you know. So.
Right. I mean, the other piece too, sorry, Suzanne, if I can just have 30 seconds, is he is mindful of not creating guidance that would allow for disparities or that would inadvertently create disparities in communities. So we can't have Newton saying, only 6 to 8 comes to school, and then Brookline decides K to 5 comes in and 6 to 8 is remote, 3 days a week.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Mariah, did you have a question or comment? Okay.
Yes. I had two questions. One is, I was interested by the idea that there might be students daily on site. And it sounded like that was more broad to me than specifically student need. It sounded like an incorporated family need. And I was just curious if how that had been sort of.
Mariah, I'm sorry. It's very hard to understand what you're saying.
Can you hear me now?
That's better, I think. Yeah, I think it's better.
Something's wrong with this mic. So I'll be faster. How are you going to, when you're thinking about who gets to go to school daily on site, how are you deciding, given the prevalence of two-parent working families, who would go there? And then my second question is, on the belief slide, I was just wondering if there was an example of something that you could share, how something might be different to achieve these beliefs in a way that they hadn't been this past year.
Well, your first question, I'll let Nicole speak to the beliefs piece, but I think your first question, if I heard you correctly, was how are we deciding who comes to the building and who stays home?
For the people who come daily, because there was 3 people, there would be all remote, hybrid, and daily, people who come to the building daily.
Oh.
One of the things that came up in the Joint Labor Management Committee meeting is really thinking about our more vulnerable population of families who are working parents and also don't have financial resource to hire stay-at-home help or a babysitter or whatever folks might do. And so we haven't made any determination, but we are thinking with folks in mind about how do we think about who to open it up to, what those numbers look like, how many students could actually partake in that and still meet the state guidelines of how many students can actually be in the building. And so we're not really clear on that. That is something that came up as, we need to be considerate of those families who are financially challenged and back to work, et cetera. And then as far as the belief statements, I think there's no difference. It's just something to anchor ourselves to as we are building for a shaved down curriculum and making sure that we, as we look at some of the things that are core and necessary, that we keep those belief statements at the core of and are able to make the comparison and make sure that what we do say we want to see happen are easily able to be connected back to the belief statements.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, yes. Is there any contemplation of returning to formal evaluation metrics of students, whether that's grading or progress reports? There were a lot of parents in the community who were concerned about their students not receiving that type of formal feedback. Of course, it was happening in some instances, but there wasn't really a standardized uniformity for evaluation.
So the commissioner did speak to there being requirements / guidance around grading. He believes that students need that feedback on the work that they're producing and that back and forth between instructor and student. So I imagine that, so short answer is yes, they're thinking about it, and we are waiting for DESE to give more so we know where our guardrails are.
And another question I have, which is more specific to special education and perhaps immunocompromised students. So there was some discussion earlier about students who may end up staying home because either that's medically indicated or their parents are uncomfortable with returning them to a school environment. What types of services do you anticipate putting in place for such students?
Yeah, so we do have some experience in this in Brookline in that we have had students who could not physically be in the building because they have been sick. And so we have found ways for those students to still have access to learning, either by live streaming into the classroom when lessons are happening, and or having tutors come into the home depending on the student's condition to either supplement that learning or in addition to. And then we have folks who can provide teletherapy in the fall. So depending on what that student needs, we have a framework for it. We've done it before.
Andy, Sharon, or Susan, do you have, any of you want to make a comment, ask a question? Andy?
Sure. So thanks, Erin, for giving us that overview of the family survey on remote learning. And from another slide, it looked like educators were surveyed as well. And I'm wondering whether there are any plans to sort of make some of those results known, just so we can all get a better sense of how that whole experience went from the educator's point of view and what we can learn for the fall.
We didn't actually send a staff survey out. So the information you're probably getting from the other slide, I'm guessing maybe Casey Nicole Calise, it came from one of their planning groups, and the information that either principals or coordinators are hearing from their own staff.
I see. So there has been no broad survey of educators the way there has been for families?
So
not yet.
Not yet.
Not from Erin's office, but the professional development council just sent out a survey on Monday for teachers about what they feel like their professional development needs will be. And in this short number of days, we've gotten 170 responses so far. And so we're expecting that we'll receive more, but that is specifically geared towards professional development.
Sharon or Susan? Comments, questions, Sharon?
No, thanks. I'm happy to wait until the DESE guidelines come.
Okay. Susan?
So a couple thoughts. First of all, I'm always very grateful for the work that that the staff has done, trying to plan for something that we can't even imagine, that we don't know, and where they'll be coming with more guidelines down the road. I guess I would just sort of say at this point, I have a few thoughts just for us to keep in mind, trying to stay at the school committee altitude. One is that I think it's our role as the school committee to think about what we would find a meaningful education for students. So in my mind, there are, and given all this, the parameters, so in my mind, I have 4 lenses, which are not intended to be cute, but it's, public health, pedagogy, price, and parents. Because public health needs to come first. Pedagogy is important because that's what we're here to do, is teach, and there are different things going on. Price is obviously going to be a factor. We don't even know what that is. And the parent needs, especially around working families, not only low-income families, although for sure low-income families who can't supervise children, but also children of first responders or whatever else. So yes, families are part of the solution, but I just think we have to be very careful about how much we rely on parents. So for me, it would just be really helpful if we had some principles or guidelines to think about this with. And I guess part of the reason I'm saying this is that I do not see, I might be in a minority here, but I don't think that DESE is going to set us free. I think that DESE will give us a lot of information. Some of it will be legislative. Some of it will be based on legislation that the legislature has passed. But a fair amount of it will either be the commissioners using as regulatory power, or quite frankly, just it's guidance. And so I guess I would like us to sort of commit to having a true north in our own minds, and not think about that whatever DESE gives us as the answer or the ceiling or the guardrails. It is a piece of it, but I think that we need a pretty strong internal true north compass about what we think good education and what is a good blend between public health, pedagogy, and price. And I think it's one of those things like faster, cheaper, better. You can sometimes have two. It's hard to have all three. So I'm hoping we can find things where public health, pedagogy, and the price all work together. But I also know that there are going to be trade-offs there, and I think it's just important for us to understand those and be as clear as possible about them. And I guess the last thing I'll say is that I think it will be helpful as we're doing this planning just to understand a little bit more about what it is that we can be allocating to this. So obviously one question is, how will the working groups work together, the various streams? And I know there's a lot of thought on that, but even questions like how much money do we have for professional development in the various pots where it sits all around the district to be able to allocate towards this, versus what are the kinds of things that we feel like we need to be doing that we don't even have budget for. And so without understanding, and we talked about this in curriculum a couple of weeks ago, but it's sort of important to understand where that professional development money is, especially if we are cutting it, which we have, and understand where it is and how it's getting deployed, so that that it really is all pulling on the same oar. So I guess it feels to me like there are a set of conversations that we need to have at the school committee level about our principles and priorities and how we want this to happen. I also think there's all of the technicalities of the work streams that have to zipper together. But I don't want us to lose our role in this. So that's my comment.
Just really quickly
we had the first set of advisory panel meetings. All four of them have had their organizational meeting. We'll be reporting out on that tomorrow morning around 9:30. So if folks are interested, you're welcome to listen in. But that first set of meetings happened, and so we can report out on that.
Just really quickly, so every year my office spends money on curriculum, planning, all that stuff that happens. So once I have my budget, I'll know better what that looks like, on top of what we've asked for in our CARES Act application. As far as the students who might need access to school every day, one of the things, and Jess actually was the one to bring this up in the meeting, was really thinking about doing some work from a social justice slant, and the idea that Brookline is all about social justice. And so we really need to be thinking about the social justice slant in planning. And so that was how that specifically came up. We did talk about first responders as well. I think we need to figure out how to make some space and priority for, what those needs are. And I think the survey that goes out to families will give us a better slant on what families actually need. So thank you for bringing those up.
Yeah, thank you. So we spent almost an hour, so I'm going to try and say my turn now and my thoughts, and then I would hope that you'll keep us informed. We probably will have another school committee meeting in first week of July sometime. And so perhaps that would be a good time to have an update once you've had a chance to look at the DESE suggestions, regulations, requirements, whatever they're going to be. But just in terms of my thoughts, I really appreciate that you spent a lot of time thinking about social emotional learning needs of our students in the survey. So thank you very much for that. I did hear a lot about the arts and wellness in terms of, movement, dance, visual arts, performing arts. So I'm hoping that's all in there somewhere because we know that's very important for many, many of our children. So I want to say that. I'm still curious to know a little bit more about what's going on with the labor management, the Joint Labor Management Committee. I'm still not sure how that's integrating and intersecting with the central office subcommittees and then with the task on learning force and what that is about. So the task force on learning. So those are the kind of the questions I still have. Again, knowing that things are going to change a lot in the next couple of weeks. So thank you for that.
Nicole, can you just give an update on just exactly how the BU's group and our planning teams have intersected? Is it some of you and some of them type of thing? Just help people understand a little more about that.
Yeah, so it's some of us and some of them. So we have it so far. It's been myself, Lisa, Casey. Next week, Michelle Herman, our PD director, will be joining at the request of BEU. And there are folks on the executive board for BEU. They have been meeting with and having meetings with a wide variety of teachers. They brought back some ideas and things that they really want to work on. And this first week, I'm just looking for my agenda here really quickly. This first week, this was our second meeting. Was it our third meeting? I think our second meeting. Creating, one of the things that has come from BEU members, teachers in particular, is the need for some kind of agreement for remote learning. What we've had parents who've gone from completely not involved to overly involved and having and jumping into classroom experiences. And so really trying to give some guidelines and like some agreements on both sides around like, what does the family responsibility look like? What does the involvement look like in a remote world? And so we're going to work on that together. They are getting some feedback and some ideas from folks that are in the union. And we've looked at other districts. I think Milton has an agreement that was started with families. And to really kind of flesh that out. The other item that we talked about was planning for families on all platforms. And so I've started to work with Scott more on how to make sure we do have planning for all training for families on all of the different platforms that students are using to engage in remote learning. And the other piece is surveying families who need more consistent child care and will not be able to engage in working again if they don't have more support from the district. And so that is something that I will be working with Erin on to figure out what kind of questions need to go out to the community. And so we've just come together, what they're bringing to us, the concerns and the ideas that have been generated among their membership. And we're saying, okay, those things make sense so far. We haven't had any disconnect, and we are then working on how we develop those things that are coming from their membership, and make sure that there is, both management and labor support for those things. And then there was another question you asked, Suzanne, about as far as the arts and dance and movement. That was on the slide. You might have missed it, but in the consistent scheduling, I did put in there, specials as well as special education and EL services. And so we are thinking beyond just core curriculum, but how do we make sure that specials are scheduled in a consistent part of the scheduling?
I think where I missed it, Nicole, was in the beliefs. I'm not sure I saw that in our core beliefs. So that's
okay. So yeah, and the core beliefs apply to all aspects of learning for students. And so it wouldn't be called out. None of the content areas are called out specifically. So they are applied to everyone across the board. Thank you for asking that question.
Thank you. So Ben, I think we're ready to move on. Are you going to give us an update on so many things, but in particular on our staffing and where we are with that?
Yep. Let me, I was going to start with BEEP. Let me start with BEEP, and then I'll sort of, because BEEP is actually one of the crucial pieces in this whole, in the whole process. So I want to just first remind, all of you know this, but I want to remind really the public is, over the last, first of all, things have been moving very quickly. We all know that. It was literally a month ago that we thought we'd have to cut $6.3 million, and we were at the original deadline for, giving layoff notices as in the contract. And, both the dollars changed very quickly on one day, and then the timeline changed on another day, and then the dollars changed again. And all of you, I mean, the school committee here has been really trying to sort of keep up with those and then make decisions in real time. And you've had to make some very difficult decisions, and both about budget, but also about staffing. And those difficult decisions have had have an impact on folks. And unfortunately, this spring, because of the pandemic, not only the whole globe, but the country and the state and also Brookline have really had significant impacts because of the pandemic, and we're all working through those together. But it does mean that folks are affected. Individuals are affected, colleagues are affected, teachers who people know and love are affected, school communities are affected. So recently, what the most recent shift and change that you folks made was to sort of scale back BEEP because of the current ECC guidelines we have. And so by doing that, you had to not only scale back the enrollment because of the class size limit, but that of course has an impact on the budget and therefore staffing. So I want to talk about two different things because there's a lot of confusion out in the community around BEEP changes. So the decisions you made last week are really impacting paraprofessionals. They really have very little, in fact, no impact on teachers, because as you decided, you were going to have 24 classrooms as we had scheduled, just fewer kids in the classrooms. So we are now working through, and Regina and Lisa Richardson and myself, Regina's done a great job identifying exactly which paraprofessional positions we need, okay? We think those, there will be some bumping, because another decision you made recently with the BEU was that seniority play an impact on when we have to lay off paraprofessionals or non-renew them, and that's for this year and the next year. And because of that, and because of a decision to reduce BEEP, we do have to. There will be some notices to paraprofessionals in the next few days. We expect those to be quite limited, and we're working with the BEU to make those very limited, including asking for voluntary layoffs for those who may be moving on anyway. So we expect those to be very limited. There's another piece to the BEEP staffing that did affect 3 teachers, and there's a lot of confusion. Folks have, it's been unclear to folks whether the impact on those 3 teachers has been because of the reduction in enrollment or other reasons, okay? And I want to sort of try to clear this up, and I also share this with you in writing, after the meeting, which is, the answer to that is no. The choice you made about reducing enrollment does not have an impact on these 3 teachers. Those 3 teachers, those positions, I should say, are being reduced from 1.0 FTE to 0.85. Almost all the teachers in BEEP are at 0.85 because of their short day. A few of them, a small number of them, I should say, have a 1.0 position for a variety of reasons, one of them being sort of extended skills sessions that we've had in the past. that level of service has been reducing over the past couple of years. And more than a year ago, BEEP decided that they would move away from, would be able to move away from 3 1.0 positions and reduce them back to 8.85, which is typical for a BEEP instructor. That was announced last year and to be carried out this year. And that's part of the original reductions that that we've been working on and had planned. So that's separate from, it's a program-based reduction, it's a level of service reduction. And that is because of that, because of the collective bargaining agreement, we are obligated to offer those 3 teachers a 1.0 position, which they can take or not. So we did that. Those were kindergarten positions. And so because of that, they have a choice to take those or not. They did, but that still then has an impact on folks who are in existing schools. What I want to assure all of you is those 3 kindergarten teachers who were bumped in that case, absolutely committed to having them work in the public schools of Brookline. They're high quality teachers that we know and respect, and principals, their principals, other principals, Lisa Richardson, Human Resources, have worked to identify positions they can move into that are vacant. We've offered each one of them a position in our schools, and they're in the process now of deciding whether they want to take those or not. So I can take questions on that, but I just want to separate out the 2 different paths here. One is related to the reduction in enrollment, and that's the paraprofessionals will be impacted. And then this other one is a level of service impact that's unrelated to that. We were making that decision either way, but they have been conflated because of the timing. So let me pause there and see if there are any questions I can help people to understand that.
So if I could just ask a clarifying question. So it's come up that there was that $110,000 gap that
yes.
we're seeing for the BEEP budget. And so some folks would like to find that money for us and give BEEP the additional $110,000. But could you explain if that has an impact on these 3 teachers or not? I suspect it doesn't, but I'd like you to just say that.
Sure.
So
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for asking that question, Suzanne. So it does not. That covers the revolving fund deficit, okay, caused by the reduction in enrollment and therefore reduction in tuition, okay. These three positions we're talking about are actually funded by the operating budget, okay. So that again, the $110,000 deficit in the revolving fund is not causing the reduction in those 3 teachers. They're unrelated. So therefore, I mean, listen, I adding $110,000 from another source, in town, we will accept that. We've got no problems with that. But I do want to be clear that it doesn't impact those positions.
Okay, questions? Who has a question, comment? Yeah. Sorry, Mariah, then Helen.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So my question, I have a couple questions. My first question is, if the program that these teachers were offering in the 12:30 to 2:30-ish part of the day is going away, when are those same services being offered to students, if not by teachers in that time? Because it was a social skills program, right, that was taking place for that 0.15?
Regina, if you could respond to that, you have.
Sure, yeah. So students' special educational needs are being met in a variety of different ways for social skills. First of all, our morning program is longer than any other our inclusive morning program is longer than any other program in the Commonwealth that I'm aware of, and I know quite a few of them, with the exception of the full day programs. So within our classrooms, there will be time to plan small group social skills instruction. In addition to that, our speech and language pathologists do have time to support students in that way. And finally, if a child is exhibiting even a more intense need for support on social skills, we do have special education teachers who can do that in the afternoon programs that we have. So we have 3 different ways that we've been able to do that. And as Superintendent Lum has said, this has been a cut that has been planned and in process for about 2.5 years, to be honest with you. And the current enrollment in the program is only 3 students. So we could not maintain that number of professional staff.
Thank you.
And
I have
real quick.
questions. I just have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to note when Ben was talking about the skills service, I want to clarify that we're not reducing any services for students who are on IEPs. And Regina can speak to under enrollment in those, but I just want to make sure that the committee and those who happen to be watching also know that no services are being reduced for students on IEPs at BEAP.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Casey.
I have a question about the librarian and the social worker team. Is now the time to ask that, or are we still just sticking to deep questions?
I didn't hear that you muffled out again on the.
My question is, can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, the Coolidge Corner School librarian reduction and the high school social worker, is now the time to ask those questions, or are we sticking to deep for now?
I'm a little hesitant. I mean, I know we're talking about 3 different people in BEAP, okay? And you're trying to like not get into specific individual positions and personnel questions here, okay?
Yeah.
No, I was trying to protect anonymity to a degree by talking about multiple teachers. So I don't think it's actually appropriate to talk about individuals at this time.
Can I zoom out and ask about, are we reducing the library program? If we're reducing, how we're reducing the library program, then?
Yeah, we are looking at a number of very specific choices that have been made. Okay, principals working with OTL and often coordinators, or sometimes coordinators, do make programmatic decisions based on schedules and student needs. Okay, and that's something that actually members of the committee have been supporting to make those more locally based decisions. So a couple of these have been those, and we're working also to make sure we're looking at those again more closely, and we'll be continuing to do that and making some adjustments as needed.
And the social worker, I mean, I thought that we had didn't the committee go through this this discussion last year about re-leveling the social work stuff. So is the social worker sort of stuff at the high school going to stay within established student maximums that have been discussed last year?
I'm not aware of any changes of social workers positions or the number of them, honestly. It doesn't mean that, I just can't speak to that because as far as I know, and I don't know every single detail here, but that's the first I've heard of an adjustment being made in that area.
Yeah, I've not heard that from the high school either.
Yeah, so we can follow up with the high school and get back to folks or through the chair, but I'm just not aware of that.
Thank you.
Helen, did you have a comment or question?
It was just more of a comment. I think, with all of these issues, these are really hard decisions that people have had to make, both our staff, the teachers. I feel for the BEAP teachers who are bumping. I feel for the teachers who have been bumped. Yeah. The situation is not a great situation. And I would hope we could think about ways to maybe help that sort of situation. So if we were to be faced with this sort of thing again, we would find a better way to do it, so that the whole world doesn't get turned around when we have to make decisions. I appreciate. I think BEAP has been sort of bantered around this year a lot, and I feel bad for teachers who feel guilty even, I would imagine at times, for what they're doing, but that they, according to the contract, certainly they're right to do. It's just the whole situation is difficult, and it's not an either or situation. So that.
No, I certainly hope, I appreciate that quite a bit, Ms. Chalupsky. I certainly would hope for Brookline or any community that there isn't a confluence of the events that we've had here, which is the budget shifting by millions of dollars within, week to week, and then combining that with the deadline about noticing, and then also obviously the combination of not knowing what school we look like and what staffing level we'd even need. So I wouldn't expect that will be, if it's something like this next year, we have learned a lot. Hopefully it won't be, but this confluence and us, also with us, if we had a deadline of June 15th, like the other state, like the most communities, it would have actually been a very different experience. Our budget would have been set by then, so and we would have many more answers and more time. So it's been very, very challenging on all levels for the community, for individuals, for groups. And that's something I think we're all have been feeling, and I think deeply sorry for. You folks have made difficult decisions in the past few weeks to really minimize that, and at this point, the number of actual reductions are really quite limited to some program-based reductions and or FTE adjustments. And without decisions you made. It would have been much, much worse, and many, many more staff would have been laid off and would have not have been recalled. I mean, dozens more. So, yeah.
So Andy and then Jennifer. Andy.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, what I have is kind of a follow-up to Helen's question, actually, about what we might learn in case we ever have to do something similar. It seems that one of the most distressing aspects of what happened is that the 3 kindergarten teachers who got bumped were teachers of color. And, however this ends up playing out, it will have set back our efforts to recruit and retain teachers of color. And I understand that seniority-based bumping is a fact of life. What I'm wondering is, does the district have any discretion in these cases to prevent an outcome like this?
We don't have much discretion in terms of people taking, at this point in your collective bargaining agreement, and everyone should look closely at that again, as always, the primary components to it are, and not in this order, seniority, licensure, and then also, where folks are on the evaluation process, okay? It is possible to put other things in that. They have to be bargained, okay? That could be language around, and other district priorities. You probably could, although I don't know if it exists, but, think about and work with the union on, district priorities related to diversified staff, staff representing the students we have, or diversified staff, so that's something that, of course, the union, as we've all heard, really values, and it's a real priority for them. So there may be a window there to put in some other components in the future. But yeah, it's something to really worth considering, because at this point, it's less limited than it used to be. 15, 20 years ago, it was just on seniority, but it still is really sort of defaults to that very quickly in certain cases. And that's what happened here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a look.
Yeah.
Jennifer?
I was just going to make a comment regarding sort of the decision-making process. There was some discussion earlier about principals having input and making decisions, and I would just encourage more communication with other staff at central office, curriculum coordinators, so that decision-making can be understood and shared across. If people are making decisions that are somewhat programmatic based on the needs of their school, just to be in communication with other, like curriculum coordinators who oversee that staff, and sort of just I just want to encourage more communication because that seems to be something we talk about a lot and that we really need to improve on. And I think we're seeing some of that. So increased collaboration and communication, I think, are just so important. And I think it could reduce some of the stress that people are feeling if there was better communication.
Thank you.
And I think, yeah, I'll leave that till later.
Susan?
Thanks. And first of all, I just want to express my appreciation as well for all of the work that the administration is trying to do right now, not only on the budget, but also on a lot of these very difficult moves. And I'm mindful that we have also eliminated positions at central office. And so the fact that people who are impacted themselves by these cuts are sometimes in these conversations, I'm just mindful of that, and mindful that we are asking the administration to do more with less. And I just want to be mindful of that. I know there are a lot of critiques this week as well about how quickly people on the 5th floor were responding to emails and information requests, and it's just in no way those information requests were all important about a whole number of things, warrant articles and BEEP and everything else. And I just we need to keep reminding ourselves that we've now cut positions to be able to do that as responsively as people would want to. So just mindful of that. It doesn't, not to open up the conversation. I think the second thing is that I think that it's important, and this is a little bit along the lines of what Andy was saying, I think it's really important that we, for this round, understand what the impacts are on a few different areas. You know, one is our educators of color, which I know a number of us, I for sure, a number of others have been harping on for a number of meetings and our concern there. And so I think understanding the impact, if any, of reductions on our educators of color is important, because that is a strategic priority that we have been investing in. And if we are undoing it, we need to be just very transparent about that and understand that. I think the second, or even if they're going into jobs that I don't want to say aren't as good, but like if they're going into jobs that are not, for whatever reason, are not as desirable, let me say it that way, as the jobs they have. And the second thing is that if there are programmatic shifts, every year we do sectioning, we reallocate sections, we reallocate caseloads. A lot of these shifts happen every single year. I think everything is under a heightened scrutiny right now. So I would urge us that if, for example, we are, this low enrollment at the high school, which happens every year, means that we are not going to run a particular class, or we've targeted reductions in the middle and elementary and middle grades to consolidate sections. That was 6 months ago. That we understand the impact of that, just because I think that there are so many moving parts that when we land this round in the next week or two, it's just important to look back at that. I do think that the questions that we've been getting from town meeting and members from advisory committee and from others are about something on a version of, well, how much money do we need to avoid this? So I appreciate that some of these moves that we've been talking about are not dependent on this, the $110,000 and whatnot. But I think it may be worth just trying to answer for ourselves. I'm mindful that town meeting is Tuesday, but the question that we are getting asked, which is like, okay, well, if we did want to, fill the bucket, what would that look like so that educators were not impacted? So, for example, and I'm not suggesting this, but what was suggested was, well, what if we gave those BEEP teachers their full 1.0, even if we only needed 0.85? And restore the kindergarten teachers back to their kindergartens. So I'm not suggesting we do any of that, but I do think that that's the question we're getting, in addition to everything else. And then I think the last question we're getting is, what else do we imagine needing? So we've talked a lot about how some students are going to need more. They're going to need more services. They're going to need more academics. They're going to need more mental health supports, wellness supports, social emotional supports, technology supports. And so I think we're getting a lot of questions about, well, are we just going to have to be hiring pretty soon? And if we are, then what does that mean? And are we going to be trying to hire back the people that we just riffed? Or shouldn't we have been planning for that, especially if we're, this impacts educators of color? So I think that there's just this piece that I know that we're still trying to land all this in the first place, but I also think that there's just this piece, right, that people are wanting to be helpful and wanting to help and
don't quite have the information to be able to do that. And I'm not sure I can answer all of these questions because of all the moving parts. I haven't been in all the conversations this week. So I think we can all do our best, but I just want to be mindful that people do want to be helpful, and to whatever extent we can help them be helpful to us, I think we should be able to do that.
Let me just add, thank you very much, Susan. I just want to add, respond or talk about one of the points you made, which is around our diversity hiring efforts and our real priority to make our staff, better reflect what our students. And this is sort of in some ways this double-edged sword, right? We have, as we've reported to you in the past, every year for the past 4 years, we've increased the number of our staff of color quite significantly. And at this point, there are only 2 communities in the Commonwealth who have a staff that's more diverse than ours. It doesn't mean we're there yet, those and recently, with Khalees's leadership and Casey's leadership, have developed affinity groups. With Khalees's leadership, have developed a pipeline or a pathway towards licensure for paraprofessionals. And then with human resources efforts and our schools efforts, over the past year, just doing a much better job of recruiting. That's paraprofessionals and teachers. Of course, because that effort is only a few years old here in Brookline, or has been sort of doubled down on the last few years. That does mean on the times like this, when there are some reductions, that those same folks are in jeopardy. And that's where you get to Andy's question about, can you actually change the bargaining language so that doesn't happen? But it's sort of in some ways the good job that the whole system has been doing has now, leads to this sort of inordinate impact who've been hiring. So it's not to explain it away. It's just to point out that it is a challenge at this point, and something we're sort of suffering from because, again, this confluence of events, right? But it's something that the district should never turn away from, and has had a lot of success with, and needs to keep pushing forward on success.
Who else? Sharon, Barbara, David, any comments, questions?
There are just before other folks, there are other pieces, because with this falling into place, there are other pieces on the layoff notices that we're rescinding that I just do want to give folks an update at some point. Suzanne, if now's an okay time, or
yeah, go ahead.
So the key thing here, as I reported last week and to the public, was just with the BEEP position falling into place, as we figured out what we would do with BEEP, all of us, we are holding off on folks who are licensed K-3 and we're in K-3 positions. And because the BEEP process has been sorted out, we've recalled all those folks back today. The non-PTS staff who were teaching in K-3, so all those folks are back now. At this point, we've called back essentially every single person except for those who were reduced because of program or sort of school needs, or some one-year positions who won't be returning next year because it was like a one-year leave and the staff member is coming back. So literally, it's out of 360 notices at this point, it's just really a handful, maybe 10, maybe a dozen, maybe 15 that have not been called back to employment.
So if I could just say, I just want people to know, the public to know, that we really do want all our people to come back, so that we're not looking for people to leave. We're looking to find positions for as many people as we can, and that really is our goal. Will we meet it 100%? I'm not sure, but we really do want our good teachers, and that's ones who are out there, to come back and to work for us. And so we're working very hard to make that happen. I keep saying attrition. There will be positions, and in fact, we'll probably be in a position where we'll be hiring new people. That will happen, I'm sure, because we'll have specific openings. But I know that Lisa Richardson's working very hard to get to everybody so that they will have choices and opportunities to take positions, maybe not the one they had this year, but they will have one next year. That's our hope. That's a goal. And so I want people to know that that's what we're working towards. Barbara. Barbara, you're on mute.
Andy spoke earlier about the fact that maybe we needed to change something so that when this kind of thing happens, there might be reasons for you're expecting a person to go and find a position where they have seniority and they can move into that position. But it seems to me, and I think that's an okay thing. But I think when you have a situation like this, where you have good teachers of color who we may end up letting go, then, and we have people who they are the people who are going to be cut if this person with seniority wants that position. I think it's up to us to make sure that doesn't happen. I don't think it's fair for either one of those people to have to lose their jobs. One, because there's a person of color that has been doing a good job, and that's a person that's very important for our district to have. But at the same time, we have somebody else in a job who has been doing a very good job, and we don't want to lose that person either. And I do think it's up to us to find the money to keep people in that situation so that this doesn't happen. Suzanne's right. You are going to have people who are going to lose their jobs. And maybe what you say is there will be to the person the person of color, for example, who is going to be ripped. We're not going to have you lose your job. We will find a job for this other person who has more seniority than you, and just make it our responsibility. And I know that's a financial issue, but sometimes the importance of keeping both of those people in jobs outweighs the financial issue. I hope I'm making sense with what I'm saying there. But
yes, Barbara, you actually, I just want to respond to a couple things. One, I do want to assure people that those 3 kindergarten teachers who are bumped have been offered positions, okay? And the principals, and both their own principals and other school principals, were very diligent in identifying which positions are open or could be open, even to the point of, there was a hiring process that there was an offer out for someone, which was on hold, and making room for these 3 folks. So they haven't. It's up to them to decide. Okay, that's their right. But it has been an absolute priority to make sure those 3 kindergarten teachers have positions in our schools, and I want to make sure people are crystal clear on that. It is always a priority about returning our own people. We just have to make sure we have positions for them. In this case, we did because of departures and that sort of thing, like Suzanne was saying. But we do have to have that combination of not only the desire and will, but also positions for them.
David or Sharon, a comment, question? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Ben. Just the one other thing I might say, even to the public, if I could, is that in particular cases where it seems that there's a backstory and we don't know it, it would be helpful if people, I don't know how they check, Ben, how do they do that? But sometimes there are stories, not just stories, but there are incidents or circumstances that we are not aware of that that influences the way decisions are made. And so I don't know how we how do we win the trust of people?
Yeah, let me just give you an example of a great way of doing it. Okay, and I think you're right. There's a lot of information and stories and questions, and they're hard to answer, especially when they come our way and that sort of thing. Specifically, Mr. Perlman, I think, did a very, very helpful thing this week, which I think is a great example. he wrote me an email. I can't remember which matter it was on. It's one of these matters I think we've been talking about, and said, I'm hearing a lot of things. Can you tell me what's going on? And I was able to, and I may happen to see the email in a timely fashion, which is often difficult, but him asking that question, as opposed to, jumping to a conclusion and already, knowing the answer or thinking they knew the answer, because it's very confusing. There's a lot of information, a lot of different pieces to it. There are a lot, as you said, rationale and reasons. But Mr. Perlman simply asking that question, asking for more information before jumping to before already having a conclusion, was really, really helpful. And I think a great example, for the committee, but for other folks as well. And I think it's hard to get all that information out, especially when folks are asking specific cases. We have to really be careful about that. But that sort of curious question, or asking for more information before getting to a conclusion, I just thought really helpful. I think to him, I hope, but also it was a great approach.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on then. I don't know, Helen, are you proposing the resolution on the state reimbursement? That's next on the list, just because it's government relations, or no?
The budget first?
Which?
If there was a budget update, maybe that's just the information that we have.
So the budget update was after this. I have it down as after this, after the possible vote on the resolution on state reimbursement.
Oh, sorry.
COVID-19 school expenses.
No, I wasn't doing that. I think that was something that was coming from teaching and learning. No?
I think this is the MASC. This is the MASC recommendations.
Okay.
To school committees, right? Isn't that what that line item is?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this was the information from MASC to school committees about a resolution to send to the legislators about
COVID expenses.
Yes,
for COVID expenses.
Yes.
Right. Oh yeah, sure. But I see it. Okay, I don't see it on here. Okay. Yes, I do see it. Sorry. I had seen, as many of you saw on the MASC website, this resolution that they're putting out. I think we should join it. To me, it's almost a no-brainer that we need the money. We need to have COVID-related money, and the legislature hopefully will be able to come up with some of that. So I would like to propose that we join that resolution.
A second.
Okay, and just for people's edification, there is a copy of it in the folder for our school committee meeting tonight. Have people had a chance to read it? Yeah, Mariah.
So first off, I have a new headset. Does this work better?
No.
No, okay.
The problem is that your voice is muffled. And so we have to listen really hard, those of us who may be a little hearing challenged.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's a new headset. I have a question. I guess my question is that the resolution doesn't talk about bulk purchasing by the state as something that school committees should be asking for. And to me, this is a parallel of the federal government leaving the states to basically battle amongst each other for supplies. And I guess I really wonder whether you want to leave it completely, you don't want to say or advocate in any way for the state to be doing the bulk purchasing for all schools or all school districts, as opposed to having everyone then try to go out and do their own procurement process.
I didn't understand. I'm sorry.
So Mariah, just give you an update around the bulk purchasing. So Dave Janikakis has been doing a significant amount of purchasing in this area, and did follow up around the state's bulk purchasing, and actually has found that, and this is one of the criticisms of our unfortunately of our state bulk purchasing, is that he was actually getting better prices talking to vendors directly for the large bulk purchasing that we would need to do. So I think for us in Brookline, we have a team put together that is going to get the best pricing. And, you know, one of everybody's concern, frankly, whether you've got bulk purchasing or don't, is whether there's going to actually be enough available and that production will be geared up to produce, because every school is opening between August and September in this, you know, in the country. So that's really sort of the production is really a concern. But he's been on top of that and working with the state procurement. There's a state procurement officials association that has been working on this. The state's been working on this. There are a lot of people trying to get best price for lots and lots.
So if I understand this, what do we call this, resolution, that it's really just saying that there should be no unfunded mandates from the state for COVID-19. In other words, if they are requiring that we do something, then they should give full reimbursement for those requirements related to COVID-19.
Yes. And that's what what we have been saying to the legislature since I've been on the school committee. No unfunded mandates, and I think this falls within that. Where it'll go, I'm not sure, but it's certainly worth joining the rest of the school committees across the state. I think everybody, you know, saying the same thing will certainly have some effect.
Other questions, comments? Are we ready for a vote? Okay. We've had a motion and a second. Jeff, you seconded, did you?
You know, so maybe I'll make the motion. Or
yeah, you did it, I think, already. Jennifer did the second.
Yeah, I seconded.
So one other question. I'm a little confused of what's here because I had put through something from MASC. Is this the MASC one? Or is this the one that was different school committees were signing on to? There was individual ones. There were two things that came across my desk. And
yeah,
right?
Maybe.
Or is this just our own resolution that can be added to add our names to the MASC and that other list also along with this?
Yeah. Susan, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think I just had a question about the language, and it was similar to Helen's, which is whose language is this? But then also there are just some things that are a little odd, like it is the responsibility of the state to ensure that each school district is able to pay for the enormous additional staffing, transportation, material expenses required to do this. Like, I'm not sure if I agree with that sentence. Like, it's just sort of a strain. There's just language in here that I think would be helpful to understand where it came from and what it's trying to do. But I'm also happy to just abstain and let this go through. There's some things in here that have unintended consequences. Maybe I should say it that way.
Yeah. David, do you know about this at all? Which one of this? There were two, I think.
I'm currently reviewing it again.
Okay. I don't know, maybe Robin, do you know?
Here, I'm looking right now on the MASC website to make sure. I thought that we had done that. Yeah, there's.
I can Helen, I actually have it. I can put it right in the drive
yes,
now.
It is the same. That's the MASC one.
Okay.
We don't always agree with their wording. I think we agree with the sentiment here, and maybe we don't get caught up in the wording as much, but we could send our own resolution. I'm more than willing to, whatever it is, I think we need to be doing something in terms of the legislature.
I support the resolution and I would like to call the question.
Okay. We're going to vote then. Are we ready?
Do we need a second to call the question?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'll second
you. Calling the question if we need one.
Okay. Helen?
Yes.
Susan,
Abstain.
David,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Mariah,
Yes.
Sharon,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. So it's 8-0-1 to support the resolution. Okay.
I'll check to see how and make sure that Ms. Coyne gets it to the appropriate people, whether it's both. It may be that we send it out to MASC and to the legislators that were listed on the letter.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Ben, I think we're going on to our budgets.
Sure. So not too many updates on this right now because from no changes from the finance committee. Was it finance committee? Advisory committee? I can't remember now. I mute. No. Okay. So two things. We submitted we submitted the budget overview and summary for the town meeting supplemental mailing this afternoon. Thanks to Mr. Perlman for spearheading the writing of the overview, the summary and overview. That's actually in your Drive folder now, in the budget folder. If you hit refresh, you'll see it there. And it has, it's a little scaled down than previous years, but has revenue sections and expense sections. It has detail about out-of-district tuitions, has quite a few definitions for town meeting members to understand our different expenditures and different revenue sources, and has quite a bit more detail than some of the early drafts, and is much more in line with what Ms. Wolf-Ditkoff showed all of you. I think it was earlier this week, or whatever that meeting was. I guess it was finance. Was it finance earlier this week? I'm sorry,
Yes.
Really.
Yes.
I'm kind of losing my mind. I will show you just one slide here quickly, in case folks hadn't seen it before, which is just 1 second here. Come on. Okay. Suzanne, can you give me a thumbs up if you see a slide? Great. Okay, good. So this is just, these are the choices you made about central office and district-wide leaders, 1.7 identified savings. Limit.
We're not looking at a slide. We're looking at the table of contents of the budget document.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, how about? No. Okay.
Got too many windows opening.
That's true.
Close that one. There we go.
Now do you see it, Marilyn?
Yeah, update FY21 balanced budget.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. So you'll see on the top two rows here the choices you made to make very big strides towards balancing the budget. You know, there's about a $500,000 deficit remaining at that point. And I just want to point out, just to remind folks, most of you saw this at the Finance Subcommittee, 3 planned K-8 positions that were in there that we've been adding every year across schools, taking out the stipends for instructional leadership teams, and then we'll also be reducing stipends for extracurricular, intramural, athletics, performing arts. Those are ones that are after school or before school, that are after school typically, that we are quite positive at this point will be reduced because of limitations on group size, on after school involvement. We don't know exactly which areas that'll be. We'll have to determine that based on state guidance and also and other areas. But those are places we expect that could be morning movement, that could be a variety of things, but because we anticipate that programming will have to be limited in some way. As we talked about before, this is just an example. It's not a decision. You know, it may be more possible to run something like, you know, golf and cross country than it may be to run basketball, you know, or football. Again, that's an illustrative point, not a decision. But that's the way we'll find that additional 455,000 that was remaining. And that's really the only update other than the detail you see in the submission to town meeting. And then Mary Ellen will take us through the two other pieces of this part of the agenda.
So in your, that's FY20. This is an update for 20. We're still hovering about $1 million, $1.2 million in deficit. However, we have a couple things currently in play to land that. The Town's CARES Act application was submitted June 5th. Approximately $630,000 of that application was to reimburse us for a number of different COVID-19 related expenses. We also just got word actually this evening that our June 15th CARES Act award, I think I don't have this mixed up, got approved. So we'll have approximately for FY20 about $70,000 of the 433 will be for FY20. And we'll take care of that Monday. And I submitted a reserve fund transfer request that will be going to the select board on the 25th. Advisory was talking about taking it up this evening. I'm not, it has to go to the select board first, so I'm not quite sure about that process, but essentially that reserve fund transfer request, if you look on the second page of my report that's in the folder, is I'm still holding $420,000 for unknown and unanticipated. We're closing down on our final payrolls, and we get questions every day about, did I get paid for? Question mark. Did I get paid for this? Did I get paid for that? So that 420 will directly reduce any reserve fund transfer request as we begin to close out our final payrolls. And then the other part that's on the select board's agenda that got moved to the 25th, I got notified this evening that it got moved from the 23rd to the 25th, is a departmental transfer authority the select board has. And there's money left over in the vocational tuition account that is the town's expense. So these are students, so parents have 6 ways to educate their children. School committee only controls one of those 6, and one of them is actually sending your child to Norfolk Aggie Minuteman school, and so the town needs a separate appropriation from that, separate from the school department budget. So at the end of the year, the select board actually has a 2-month window where they can do a departmental transfer. So I've asked them to transfer the balance of that account to the school department to help offset our deficit. So roughly maybe about a $27,000 reserve fund transfer if nothing shows up. That's best case. If nothing shows up between now and July 9th, which will be when we close out our last payroll items and invoicing for the statutory close of July 15th. So we have a glide path, see if we can land it, and continuing just to keep getting bills paid and purchase orders closed and payroll paid.
Helen.
So just a quick question. How close are we to the end of the encumbrances and the bills paid? And how much, has there been any more monies that we've been able to recover from?
No, I think right now we've gone through all the low-hanging fruit. So the items that are going to show up now are, we thought the bill was going to come in for $100 and it's only coming in for 90. So it's going to be small little bits that come through. We're trying to get departments to get vendors to give us invoices so we can get as many of them paid. because I don't really want to carry over any purchase orders into next year, because by now we should have received all of these. So a lot of it's in tuitions, I have to tell you, is really the tuition bills, the June tuition bills that we're waiting on, and we won't get those until probably next week as school closes.
Okay.
So Mary Ellen, I'm sorry, but I'm still confused. How much are you going to go for reserve fund transfer on the 25th? Is that for the 500,000?
So the request I made was up to 500,000 as a placeholder, with an understanding that the advisory does not, they have a meeting, believe they actually schedule a meeting July 9th, whatever that Monday or Tuesday is of that last week, to handle any kind of last minute things. And by then I would know exactly what that reserve fund would need to be. I did share with Devin Williams that I would have another financial update for their meeting on the 25th. So, because I'm doing these every week.
So on the 25th, you still might be asking for up to 500,000.
I think I would be asking for less than, because the final teacher's pay will have, all the school year pay will finally be paid on the 23rd and the 25th. So that will that generally posts like late Wednesday afternoon. So Thursday morning I'll know sort of, and that's the last large payroll that we have. And then all the furloughs that have just been gone through will also finally be settled out and completed. And so I'll know what our payrolls are going to be for July 2nd and the 2 days that are on the July 9th to 11th payroll.
Okay. So
it's a moving target. I can't tell you at this point. Like I would love to. I don't have a crystal ball. If I had one, I would be on my own private island with an umbrella drink.
Yeah, good idea. Okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions about FY20? Okay, seeing none.
Jennifer, did you have?
Sorry, I just have a really quick question. Mary Ellen, when you have that number and you're going to go to the meeting and you know what you're going to ask for, could you just email us that information?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you get ready to go to the meeting and you know what it is, could you just maybe send that out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm anticipating that I'll be doing this summary report on a weekly basis. So there'll be the 25th, there'll be one on the next, whatever the next Thursday is, then the following Thursday all the way to the bitter end.
Susan?
Yeah, just quickly, I do want folks to know that the advisory committee has docketed a discussion and possible vote on a reserve fund transfer of up to $500,000 to the public schools of Brookline tonight. I am well aware that theoretically the select board is supposed to go first. I just want you all to know that it's docketed and they plan to have a discussion on it and they'd like one of us to be there for that discussion, and they're going to do what they do because that's what they do.
So I have not shared this with the school subcommittee of advisory this evening. I didn't send it there. So they don't have a copy of this.
Okay.
I don't know if it matters.
Okay.
And I don't have the link or time of when they're bringing this on. So do you know that, Susan, or is that you and me?
Well, so on a different screen, I'm watching them. Chief Lipson is still there, so it might be a while. But no, I expect someone will send me a text message and then I'll let you know.
Okay. So is that it for the updates on 20 and on 21? Ben, is that it, Mary Ellen?
Ben.
That's it on the updates, but there's still a couple other agenda items in this section, though.
Right, I see that. Right. So who's going to talk about the meal choices?
Mary Ellen.
I was hoping that Matt would have finished his request in terms of giving you an estimate of what the deficit would be for providing meals. So part of the issue that we have is that the reimbursement for meals does not cover the cost of providing meals for our free reduced lunch students. And so we just need to know from the committee whether you want to have us provide meals this summer, whether a student is in summer school or not, which shouldn't matter, but or and at a deficit or not, because we have the only source of funding that we would need to secure would be from the town's CARES Act funding, and because it's specifically highlighted in that allowance of expenditure for that source of funding. Usually our summer school program runs about a $60,000 deficit during the summer for the meals program. I don't know that it would be that high because the program is, I believe, a third of the size of what it typically is during an annual summer. So wanted to get a sense from the committee about whether that is something that you want us to continue, to do and go ahead and we'll figure out the funding, or whether that's something that you don't have excuse the pun, the appetite for adding a deficit to the operating budget.
Mary Ellen, do we make up that deficit during the year? Does it cover it somehow?
We almost did this year until COVID-19 happened. We had just hit break even, and we're actually starting to actually show progress in food service where we were not going to run a deficit, and then we had a pandemic hit and all our good work unraveled. So I don't know. This year, I would say I have no idea because we don't know what we're going to be providing for in the fall either.
If they did not get meals from us, would they get them from Brookline Housing Authority or some other program? Or
so the food pantry, we still have our arrangement with the food pantry. I'm not quite. I would imagine that they would continue supporting their number of clients that they've increased during this period of time. We've seen a drop in meals as the food pantry has geared up through the course of providing meals. So, however, if the food pantry scales back, then I would imagine that the number of meals that we would see would increase. So we can table this till another meeting. I just want to make sure the committee is aware, because this is, or that we make sure that we're going to secure funding or agreement from the select board that they would fund this piece for the summer or the fall, or they would carve out subsidy for food service as we reopen school for a deficit to run because the reimbursement doesn't cover our costs.
Jennifer, then Susan.
Actually, I think she just answered I needed clarification about what was causing the deficit, and it's just that our expenses are not offset by the government reimbursement.
Correct.
To the tune of about $60,000.
In a normal summer, yes. That includes the fee that we charged for paying as well as the reimbursement for free and reduced lunch students.
Why could you tell me if there's a short version of why we don't get reimbursed the full amount of our cost?
Because our total meal cost is greater than what the federal government reimburses on. It's like a 30 to 50 cent difference per meal per child.
Okay.
It's part of the expense of the program that we have.
Okay.
Susan?
Yeah, so thank you. I think the piece that is important for me to understand is the effect of this on our lower income students or free and reduced lunch students versus other students who in a typical summer will access the meal program. I think to the extent that we're running a deficit for our free and reduced lunch students, I'm very interested in that conversation. I'm less interested in running a deficit for non-free and reduced lunch populations that that sometimes we run into in summer meals. I think the second thing is that the food, it may be worth people understanding what type of food we provide versus the food pantry. I don't think that those are equivalent, and nor are they intended to be. And I guess the last thing I would say is it's important for us to understand the revenue sources for the food pantry versus where we would get it from. So for example, to the extent that they are relying, at least in part, if not more in part, on private philanthropy, that means that the town at a net level is foregoing government reimbursement for free and reduced lunch in order to, and subsidizing it with philanthropy. And I know there are other things going on with their revenue streams, but I just think it's important for us to think about it as a macro picture, both from the point of view of the children who are free and reduced lunch eligible, and also the revenue that is available to the town somewhere, either the schools, the food pantry, whatever, and the reimbursements that's like. Because again, the meals are different, and I think that's important for folks to understand. So we don't do it now, but I would like some more information about that, and I'd be interested in making a case for subsidy under some of those circumstances.
Anyone else before Jennifer? Anyone else have a comment or question? Yeah, Helen. I'll get to you, Jennifer.
When are the meals going to continue throughout the summer? Is that the plan? Or is they just when summer school is in session?
That is the question.
So we've been doing meals all along now.
Yes.
Breakfast and lunch.
Yes. Breakfast and lunch.
A week.
Yep. Equivalent of 5 days a week. Delivery 3 days a week.
There'll be no school from June 23rd till August, more or less, when we begin summer school.
Well, summer school is like July 13th. Casey, I saw you like yeah. There's a 2 to 3 week gap this year.
And we would be providing the breakfast and lunch during that time, which we could get reimbursed for still.
During summer school, yes, but not during the down weeks.
Not during the down weeks. And in the past, have we provided it during the down weeks?
No. No. So if there's a strong interest on the part of the committee, I will get on Matt to finish up the financials and review of that, so that we can get. So you have you know and understand what the exposure is, and we can also submit that to the town as well for a subsidy under the CARES Act funding.
Okay, so we don't need to vote tonight. Is that?
No. I just really want to make sure people have. I want to make sure school committee has an opportunity to really understand sort of what the trade-offs are, and so that once you know what the dollar value, you have an idea of where you want to go, but then once you know what the dollar value is, then we know what the hard decision is going to be.
Sorry, when do you need a vote by? Like, when will we vote that?
I guess my question is, when is our next committee meeting?
We haven't said it yet, but we're thinking July 7th or 8th or something, whatever that. Well, the 9th is a Thursday.
You mean you're not going to have another one next week that I can come to?
Just for you, Ben, just for you.
Really, it's okay.
Is that soon enough, Mary Ellen? July 9th-ish?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can be. It has to be. It's fine.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute. Well, so I'm sorry.
I don't know what to do.
So sorry, when is the earliest that students would start receiving food? If we were to vote it tonight, which it sounds like we're not going to.
So there's typically a gap between the last day of school and the first day of summer school. That's typical every year. We would have a gap. We would not be serving meals. This is not a typical year. So if you voted, so if it were a typical year and you voted the 9th, we would be proceeding the next week with meals or not meals, or know what the situation is for the duration of summer school, which is the 13th through the middle of August, 17th of August, I believe. And then there would be another gap between that August and the beginning of school. So that's the normal sort of routine around when meals would be available. The question would be whether we would do meals in between and continue to do meals. That was one of the questions during the downtime.
Right, and I guess I'm a little bit uncomfortable just because we don't have another school committee meeting, creating a 3-week gap in meals for these children. So I'm not sure what to do about that at this point. We're kind of, whatever, it's 8 o'clock, but I'm not comfortable with this unless I'm missing something.
We're going to Mariah. We come back, Mariah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My third microphone of the night. So I agree with Susan, and I guess I understand from what you're saying, Mary Ellen, that there's typically a gap, but this isn't a typical year. And so I guess I wonder if we could vote it tonight, but could you sort of give an indication? I'm doing rough math on what you said. It sounds like it's more or less like a $10,000 a week run rate, but that couldn't be. You said it was a $60,000 gap for a typical year, but we're probably talking about less money this year, I would imagine. Anyway, I guess my point is I would like to move that we provide the meals continuously without a gap between the end of the school year and the beginning of summer school, and that we vote it tonight so that we can provide that continuous meal service.
Yeah, Mariah, that's exactly where I was trying to go. So thank you.
Yeah.
Jennifer, you had asked a question a long time ago. Do you still have it?
Yeah, I guess it's a two-part question, which I don't think we have the information on. And while I'm supportive of wanting to provide food to kids, that's an easy no-brainer for me. I'm just need to kind of have a better feel for where we've seen some significant deficits that we've had to overcome in food services. So I guess I'm just a little cautious because we've spent so much time on this. I just really would like to have a better sense of what our exposure is if we were not able to get subsidy through the town, through the CARES Act. Just to know going into it what it is that is our investment here so that we know how much money we're talking about. I think that would be really helpful to sort of at least have a ballpark idea of what would it, so I guess I actually have one more question than that is in the off weeks when students are not in school, would the expense be more because we wouldn't be getting reimbursement, or can we get reimbursement from the federal government for student meals in out of school time? I guess that's one piece. Like, could we get reimbursement on the whole summer or only the part of the summer that's in summer school? And then what would we need to do to make sure we could get the money for the subsidy from the CARES Act? So I guess there's a couple questions in there.
So I do know that with these federal government subsidies, we apply for a band of time, and so if that start date and end date were submitted for July 13th and August 17th, that would be the reimbursement band. Whether we can amend that, I mean, certainly we would ask to whether we can amend that to receive the federal subsidy as much as we can, or to ask for a waiver. That's not a guarantee. And then I think the piece is really getting a commitment from the town that we can submit for the difference through the CARES Act, and this is how much we need to carve out. And I wish that we had the financials for you so we knew the exposure, because whether we're talking about a $30,000 concern, bookending last day of school, first day of school, to 60,000 concern last day of school, beginning first day of school, and is that a net? Is that subject to federal subsidy? I wish I could tell you.
Are we confident?
I know Matt was going to come on for the executive session, so I texted him to see if he might be available a little earlier, but I don't know that he has the financial analysis done.
Okay, so I guess that's my question is on what do we think is our the largest number that we might be dealing with? We don't really have a sense of that. Like is it really 60,000 for the entire summer? Is that really our total possible exposure? Maybe it's less, maybe, but we don't know.
The number I don't know. The number of 60,000 is what last summer's ran.
But that wasn't for the whole summer, right?
Right. But that was a typical summer, so I don't know. It just is a ballpark.
Okay.
You know, I'm part of the community development grant group, for giving out grants anyway. And they were talking a lot about how they brought the food into Brookline Housing Authority, into the housing itself, and how effective that was. It just seems to me we should be in a partnership with somebody, the food pantry or some public health or something.
Brookline Thrives.
Yeah, someone that can work with us, that we can work with, so that it gets the food to the children who need it, and it also covers some of our exposure to the finance of it.
Yeah, because one question I have, I was sort of remembering some of our menus from summers past, and if I recollect, well, some of it was just peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Yeah,
not to say they're not nutritious. My kids lived on them for years, but and I think Brookline Thrives does a better job in some ways. I mean, they certainly provide weekend food for kids. I don't know what has been happening during this time, during COVID. I know the food pantry has been very active. They've been using our facilities to store food. So I don't know. I think this, I mean, I don't want to vote against giving food to kids, but on the other hand, I want to do it in a smart way. And I'm not sure what the smart way is. Maybe we could get one or two school committee members to work with Mary Ellen on making, I don't know.
Well, I think it's really the missing piece of information is really the financial exposure that we have.
Well, it's not just the financials, financial plus what is already happening in the community.
For the summer, in terms of, yeah.
And having that connection and making sure that we're talking together. Kim, I forget the woman's name who does Brookline Thrives, I think is a wonderful resource. And
Kim Kushner.
Kim Kushner, thank you.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
I think that this is a serious issue and it requires our attention prior to the last day of school. I also think that the concerns that have been raised are valid and more information is required. I'd like to propose that 2 volunteers work with Mary Ellen to come up with a very brief summary of what the financial impact of this policy will be, and that we convene a very brief session specifically for the purpose of addressing this issue immediately prior to town meeting.
Why town meeting?
Because that will make us not go really long and add other stuff to the calendar. And it also is right around the last day of school.
Good plan.
I'm going to be out of town otherwise. I want to vote for it.
Mariah?
I think that might be too late because the first day of town meeting is the last day of school. And I don't know if Mary Ellen, I don't know if you can wait to know, basically, are we funding a lunch program starting the next day or not?
That's fair. Right. Mary Ellen, can we?
But you can't convene a meeting before Tuesday, I don't think.
But we could vote it tonight.
Oh.
My suggestion is that we vote it because this isn't mandating Mary Ellen to spend the money. And if there's a way to do it smarter with Thrives in the meantime, great. But this way we've enabled the possibility of having this happen. And we don't have to come back to discuss it. If there's a smarter way, we don't do it. And if not, then this is what we do.
And you can certainly put a dollar limit on it. So if it goes or exceeds 25 grand, then we have to come back.
Andy?
Yeah, could we vote now to do it through, say, July 9th, and then vote on July 9th about the rest of the summer?
I actually like Mariah's suggestion better to vote an up number and try and work out and see what the options are to make sure that kids get good, nutritious food.
Jennifer, did you have something?
No, I was just going to say that I was a little nervous about voting it just through July 9th, just because I think that families need to understand what the program will be and whether or not it's going to go through the whole summer or just be summer school. Because I think those are two sort of natural blocks of time, either when my kids are in summer school or the whole summer. So it's a good idea. I think that it just would be better for families if we could sort of give them an indication of what they can expect. I mean, I guess I'm a little more comfortable with saying, let's vote it with a certain number. And if we hit that number, we should have another conversation. But I also think I really like the idea about, and I've written that down actually, Suzanne, about working with community partners to sort of see what kind of collaboration that we could come up with. I'm sure other people in town are interested in helping us feed kids. We want to do it. I think it's the right thing to do. I don't know what they can do with us in collaboration, but it would be good to find out. Susan, were you saying
because
something?
we are, because we are already in partnership with other, we've been working with the food pantry and Thrives certainly since the COVID closure. And so, Mary Ellen, I think it would just be helpful for folks to understand what we are doing.
I can't actually tell you because I got pulled off and out of that, so I'm out of that mix to know what's current. So Matt just texted me he's coming on shortly. Answer that. He knows more about what the integration has been with Brookline Thrives, the food pantry, the delivery of meals to the housing authority, the expansion, and then the sort of the contraction that may be occurring over the summer. He's much more informed, I hope, of all of that than I am now. So I don't know how many minutes it will be that he comes on.
Well, so if it's the will of the committee, we can come back to this, or if somebody has a motion that they want to go ahead and put forth that would be seconded, we can vote. So what's Mariah?
I move that we fund the program following Mary Ellen's suggestion of a $25,000 cap. And if we come close to hitting the cap, we need to revisit. Hold on one second, Rita.
There's a heart in there.
Yeah. Was that clear? Sorry.
Mariah, can we at least wait till Matt answers our questions tonight? Because, or do you want to do it before he answers our questions?
I thought Suzanne wanted us to call a question.
No. Well, I asked you, do we want a motion or do we want to wait for Matt and then have a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that. I'm happy to wait for Matt.
Okay. So I guess if it's okay with, is that okay with most people? We'll wait till Matt comes to answer our questions. Okay. Okay, thank you. We're going to move on then to our subcommittees and
need to vote fees.
I'm sorry.
You need to vote fees.
Oh, sorry.
Annually, the school committee should be publicly voting all fees, even though they may not even change. We do have the BEEP tuition you already voted in April.
Right.
We've been doing a 3% increase on the materials fee annually, and a 2% increase on our international students. So I don't believe we're going to actually have any international students this year, but you never know. All the other fees are unchanged for next year. But that would be the just voting the fees and establishing the fees annually, so they're publicly in the minutes.
Okay. Helen?
So two things. One, the 510,000 that is here for materials fee, tuition, are there included in that 510 international students?
No.
Okay, so it's just the materials fee at this point.
Yes.
It's the same as last year, the same amount. It's not 3% more.
Well, because I don't know how many students, the number of students
could change. Okay.
Could change.
Okay.
Being conservative.
Okay.
Even
and that's great. And athletics, we will vote the fees, but if there's no athletics, there's no fees.
Right.
Do we have expenditures still that we will have in that?
Potentially, but if we're not going to be offering a program, we wouldn't collect a fee. It's just the fee stands. That's why part of why we're not changing fees.
And the bus fees are, what happens with that if we don't?
If we don't have transportation, we're not collecting a fee.
Okay.
And we would prorate. I mean, the motion potentially would be that you would prorate certain fees based on the start of a service.
Okay.
Susan?
I'll move it.
Okay.
Do other people have comments, or was that me, Suzanne?
Well, let's do, she has a motion. Does someone want to second it, and then we'll go to comments?
All right.
Someone second? I'll second it.
That's the second one.
I just, there are like
controversial.
Go ahead,
There
Susan.
are a number of these where we haven't, there are just a number of these where we haven't actually decided what the program is. So it's a little bit hard to vote the fee, meaning like the South Brookline bus transportation is a perfect example. Like we don't know what our costs are going to be because not only don't we know what school's going to look like, but we don't know what busing is going to look like. So it's a little hard to know if this is the right busing fee until we know what kind of busing we're providing. I think the same thing is true with school lunches. I mean, and a bunch of these, I guess I'm a little confused about the order, maybe just because we didn't do this in finance yet, but how we're going to vote these without knowing what some of our costs are.
Who's going to talk?
Jennifer, did you want to say something? And then David.
I was just looking at the memo in the first page of the memo that I assume that we're talking about, Mary Ellen, about revolving budget and FY21 fees. And so I just had a question, I guess sort of related to this about adult and community ed and the projected revenue budget and whether or not I know that course enrollment and course offerings are down or limited because of the COVID changes. And so I just didn't know if this number reflects any of the expected changes that they are expecting as a program. And then related to that is the use of school buildings. And I'm assuming that some of our rental fees and whether or not we'll actually be able to collect any revenues if we can't open up the school. So those are two that on that front page, I was just wondering, like, how did we get these numbers and does it take into account? I know that, I've met with adult and community ed, and I know they've had a lot of changes because of the spring was really tough on their financials. So they have some, and summers are not going to be the same. So summer offerings are not the same. Not sure what fall is going to look like. And so that's going to affect if we're counting on revenue. So I just.
So revolving funds should be a break-even fund, and so ideally they're not incurring expenses if their program is reduced or like for Restaurant 108, for example, it's not running in fiscal year 21. And so those are, and we've adjusted this high school, summer school down. We adjusted materials fee down. Performing arts and visual arts, we don't know what those are going to be because we don't know quite yet what their program is going to be. School lunch, we also don't know. So these are projected in terms of what the potential could be, but the expectation is that a revolving fund is a break-even venture, that they don't incur large fund balances at the end of the year, and they don't incur deficits at all at the end of the year. So they would be modified accordingly. The reason why you want to vote a fee once a year is so that you don't have a fee discussion every month when the program starts, and you technically should be, school committee should be voting that fee so that they can plan their revenue and program accordingly, and then come back to you if there needs to be an adjustment to that fee. Just as we came back to you to suspend the deep tuition because of the feedback from families around paying tuition. So those are estimates and they're projected. You normally would also have the corresponding budgets against those in our in the budget in terms of what their expenditures are. So those are obviously going to be updated based on, you know, when we find out what kind of our offerings are going to be. So part of the piece of this is, well, with food service, we plan, you know, I don't imagine that we would be recommending any increase to a food service meal price. We increased it, I believe, last year. Matt's on the call. Typically, you would not increase that every year, and you would be, we would be, you know, planning our meals to the pricing that we have. So it's important for families to know if there are going to be fee increases, what those are going to be at the end of the school year in preparation for September, as opposed to finding out in September that there's an increased fee, or potentially having their student begin an activity and then find out the fee is increased, you know, that month or in September. So normally we should have done this well into February, March timeframe, but that time was taken up with other tasks and priorities.
I can add a little insight into some of the operations fees. So the food service fee, like Mary Ellen said, doesn't really need to change. What we do need to manage is the staffing level to how many meals we're actually selling or giving out, because it's about revenue matching our expenses. So if we're going to have a drastic reduction in meals provided, then we need to reduce the staff so that we don't overrun the budget. For transportation, we do have a pretty good idea of what the program is going to look like. The market is not capable of social distancing all the buses and expanding the buses across the state. That's just not going to happen. It takes about 9 months to construct a bus. Most of them are made to order. It's not there. I've had the discussion with Dr. Jett, and he understands and is relatively comfortable with buses being as spaced out as they can be, but understands that you're not going to have 24 kids on a bus that seats 70, especially since not all the kids are getting on at the same time. Typically, they're going to be as spaced out as they can be, and hopefully they'll all be wearing their masks on the bus ride to school. So those costs are relatively known, as we have a contract for bus service for next year, and the fee remains static. For rental revolving, those fees are mostly to recover our costs of additional costs of custodial, wear and tear, and utilities. When people aren't renting the building, you know, we have less maintenance, we can lower the utilities, and we're not paying as much in custodial overtime or some other costs there. So most of that's why most of the fees are staying static. They've been raised either in the last year or two, and we pretty much, the fees are set to recover our costs, which are largely known. You know, I'm not sure if folks find that helpful or not, but those are the reasons why they are where they are.
David, did you have your hand up before?
Yes, just a question I had is, what is the deadline in terms of when you would like these fees approved? Is there sort of a last possible date, a last practical date? You can elucidate around the time frame?
So in a normal year, the last practical date is the week before the last day of school. The ideal date is part of the budget process in February and March. That would be the ideal timing.
Yeah. Susan, did you have last word? Because then I'm going to call the vote.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to say I don't think we should be voting this now. I think I agree with Mary Ellen, but we've been working so hard on these revolving funds to have them be break even. They shouldn't be incurring a deficit, and it is important for families to know before they leave the year what the fee will be. But we can't actually tell them that. We just can't. And unless we're going to commit to running a deficit on a bunch of these funds. And so I'll just pick on busing. I mean, maybe we're going to get to a place where we say, you know what, South Brookline busing, we just shouldn't run it. Not the one that we're mandated to run, but we just shouldn't run it. That doesn't make sense to do. Similarly, with some of the other ones, I am concerned that the maintenance of effort notion, which I appreciate, to just get a vote done, doesn't actually achieve our goal of making sure that anything we're offering in a revolving fund, we've actually committed to finding a way to do at break even, or maybe we have to increase the fee. And if we have to increase the fee, if we're going to say, well, you know, this is our best guess, to me, that doesn't help at all. So I just don't see the point in doing that, because we're going to have to change this anyway. So I would suggest we not vote it. It hasn't come to finance, so otherwise I would have said it earlier. But I just don't think this is ready to vote. But others may feel differently, and I don't think there's a consequence to not voting it, given that it's going to have to change anyway.
Okay, we do have a motion, unless it's withdrawn. Helen, you're on mute. Did you say something?
Susan's right. I can withdraw the motion and we can vote this later in the summer. And we can get notices out to parents if it's changing. Because if it stays the same, nobody really cares. They just assume that. And if it's changing, we can make sure that we let people know. We probably do need more information, just as we need more information about the lunches. I mean, it's all the same sort of thing that we probably should have been on top of before.
Is that the will of the committee? Just a thumbs up, thumbs down? Not official. Okay. Okay, we'll come back to it. What about the lunches? Come back to it another meeting.
Matt's here to jump on the question around meals from the last day of school all the way to the first day of school, instead of having a downtime break. And then what are our arrangements with our local partners like Brookline Thrives, the food pantry? And so what would happen if we weren't providing meals? Would those agencies be able to pick up what we would drop off in terms of food service meals? I think I captured that.
So the food service program every summer basically runs at a deficit, because we have 12-month employees and we don't take enough meal sales or reimbursement income in. So, and we have 3 12-month employees, the director, the assistant director, and a 12-month administrative support secretary position. Then when we are serving lunch, we do have the food staff in to prepare the meals. So we have the food costs and those labor costs as well. And August is always kind of a ramp up month where we have more expenses, but school hasn't started as we're getting food in to be ready. So those months always show negatively on the food service program. So we could not run food service for the summer if we really wanted to make sure we didn't have any loss, but we'd have to, have a reduction in force and lay off staff, and we'd have some fairly upset parents who have, rely on the food service program. Typical summer school, we have 900 to 1,100 kids in during the summer school months. This year, we're going to have 68 special ed students, no regular ed students, they'll all be virtual, and approximately 360 students that are in the recreation program. So we're going to be running a pretty small and light summer program. Most of the kids go home at noon, so they can take a bag lunch with them, or they don't need it. It'd be a significant change in the way we do business, and if the message I'm hearing from the committee is that we need to manage the program so that we don't overspend, then mostly that's staffing and services offered, whether it's food service or anything else. So I just want to make sure I'm hearing that correctly, because we can, make recommendations to HR about changing staffing levels if that's the case.
Susan, then Jennifer.
So Matt, I think let me just sort of pull back, because you came in a part of the conversation where we were not talking about free and reduced lunch. We were talking about like South Brookline buses, which are, I don't want to say a nice to have because they're important to some families, but
it's an optional program.
Right. The conversation about free and reduced lunch was start with the significant concern that there are going to be children who this summer especially are not going to have access to, or increasing number who are going to need it or not have access to meals. So I think we were almost going in the other direction, which is, number one, what is our current status of our partnerships with Brookline Thrives and Food Pantry, if you can tell us what that is, and then tell us if we didn't provide this, what would happen with the kids, and would they, would the reimbursements come some other way, or would they get food some other way? And then I think finally, I think there was an interest in understanding the implication of adding the gap weeks, which we don't normally do, out of concern for the kids, and what kind of implications that would have. So I think we were almost going in the other direction with this question.
Okay. So our current partnership with Brookline Thrives and the Food Pantry is first that we give them access to 2 kitchen fridges and freezers, walk-in fridges and freezers for food storage. That'd be the first one. They use it just for food storage and prep. We don't hand out food at the schools. The second thing is we drop off bagged lunches for 2 days, or on weekends for 3 days, lunch and breakfast, via the expanded food service program with the shutdown. We drop off meals there, and people come to pick them up on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. On Fridays, they can keep the meals and give them out on Fridays or Saturdays when the food pantry is open. But on Mondays and Wednesdays, what isn't taken, we wind up taking back, and usually, it becomes discarded, because we generally don't keep the stuff that's made for a couple of days to give back out on the next meal, on the next time we're giving out food. Our participation has gone from 30 some odd kids the first couple of weeks to up to about 300 per day. We have about 900 students on free and reduced lunch. So I think the food pantries are helping with a lot of those families, because they're not coming to us no matter what level of outreach we've done, whether they come to the 4 schools to pick things up, or we go to some of the Brookline Housing Authority sites and food pantries to drop off and give out food. The participation isn't there. It's always sort of a concern for us, what do kids do on the vacations and the breaks? And Brookline Thrives, I think, helps with that. And if we are open in school, they've already asked, can we get back in? For the 5 minutes that they come in to drop off their containers of food, I just don't see it being an issue. So, I mean, that's pretty much the summary of our partnership. We will, in anticipation that we'll be open, we will ramp it down in August. We will get our kitchens, fridges and freezers back. We also loan them 4 milk coolers to increase cold storage space for whether it's food from us or any other donations that they've been able to get. And a significant part of their growth and participation also comes from Brighton and Jamaica Plain, as some local food pantries that were largely staffed by senior citizen volunteers when COVID came out. Their volunteers sort of dried up, and then the people went to the next nearest food pantry, and for both of them, that happened to be Brookline. So, credit to Brookline for being such good neighbors and not turning anybody away that comes for help.
Yeah, Jennifer.
Matt, could you just repeat for me the part about the number of students that we see participating in the program that we're running right now off of school?
Yeah, it's about the last few weeks we're between 250 and 300 and change.
And so how does that compare? We're just sort of, I think at one point we were trying to understand the financials of what it would cost us to run the whole summer. Do we have any way of estimating that?
Yeah, I've been working on that. It's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. I keep getting interrupted with other things, and financials, I just need some uninterrupted time to make sure it's 100% accurate before I release it. You know, today was a payroll problem. Some people didn't get paid. That doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it requires your time and attention.
So does anyone have a motion or how we want to do this? Do we want to try and vote tonight on something? Are we going to wait? What are we thinking? Susan, were you going to, oh, Mariah, did you have something? Who has something?
I would still like to move that we pursue the program, continuous funding of the program, or continuous operation of the program.
Through the summer. Yeah.
Sorry?
Through the summer?
Yes.
Yeah. Do we have a
ballpark number here at all? Do we have anything?
Well, the summer is quite different because we usually just have a handful of staff on, and that's, we've furloughed everybody else except for the handful of staff who have been working through this. Yeah, I can get that number for tomorrow. I'm sorry I wasn't able to finish it today.
Yeah, I would suggest that maybe what we could do is we can vote it tonight. We can certainly, to make Mr. Lummis happy, we can have a finance subcommittee meeting or something next week, whereby we can go through some of the math in a little bit more depth. And if we need to make changes, we can make changes. But it seems to me that I think the questions that we're trying to figure out, Matt, are number one, if we were to offer this for the entire summer, no gaps, only for free and reduced lunch kids, what kind of subsidy are we looking at? And then I think what is the implication if we don't do that? And how much of the gap the pantry or Thrives or anyone else could fill? And frankly, if we can access more federal reimbursement than they can, which I think we can, but I'm not 100% sure of, then, and we can provide at least somewhat more nutritious meals, it feels to me like there are a few different pieces to this that we should just sort of sort through. But on the theory that we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, I would support Mariah's motion, and maybe we can just go through some of the specifics next week. And if it turns out that it is hundreds of thousands of dollars, we can always, I suppose we can reconsider it. But I guess that would be my second to Mariah's motion.
So it's not going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars in the summer for just the summer program. And it's not just free and reduced lunch students like it would normally be, where we would get reimbursement, or we would have people that would pay us a fee for the lunch. Right now, all students under the temporary federal program are free. So we don't ask questions. You know, if the kid wants a lunch and they put in for it, we give it to them, and we get reimbursement of $3.50 something, something to that effect.
Right. And Thrives and the food pantry they don't get that reimbursement, or they get a different reimbursement?
No, they get access to the food bank. They don't get the reimbursement. We produce the lunch.
Right.
You know, they serve as like a holding pattern or a staging area, and usually it's our staff that are there. And then when they leave, if they have some extras, you know, we're getting credit for it because they're giving them out. I mean, they've sort of told us when it's too much, we're throwing it away or not. It's kind of a living, breathing, evolving process and program. You know, there were some people that didn't want to leave their house before to go have their kids leave the house to go get food. And then when we started showing up there, then they came around. And there doesn't seem to be a consistency to the numbers every day or every week. So I think people go to it when they need it, and if they don't feel they need it, or they've got it covered another way, they don't come to us in the window when we're available. They take care of it at another time.
So I think we have Mariah's motion, and Susan, you seconded it, that says we would like to go forward and bring, and then in addition, finance will take a look at this in greater depth and maybe make some recommendations.
I think that's right. And Matt, I think the question was, just to be super clear, I think it was trying to do this without a gap, meaning not what we normally do for the summer school students. I think that's where the conversation was before you came on.
Right, and what I took that is you know, we need to manage our expenses better to what the revenue is coming in. So we'll estimate the meals, we'll do the revenue expenditure and revenues total. Then we have to match up our expenditures, and if that means changing staff, then we change staff, because the staff wages are fixed. You know, they're contracted, they have their rates. So if they're working, we have to pay them. If they're not working, then we don't have to pay them.
Are we ready to call the vote? Okay, Helen?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
And I vote yes, that's unanimous. So Susan, you'll take it up in finance to take a closer look, perhaps?
I'd be delighted to.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, moving on. We're doing okay. Not too bad, folks. We have subcommittee reports, knowing that some of these we've just discussed, perhaps. So if you don't have anything extra, that's okay. Finance. Do we have anything in finance to report? We've been doing that, but
I feel like almost all of our meetings are all finance. I'm sure there's something. I can't think of anything right now. I do have something for the Driscoll project, but I don't think I have anything for finance.
Okay. Capital improvement.
So there's a couple things, and then I'll let Susan at the end talk about Driscoll. Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Today we voted the Pierce School RFS request for services for the OPM. The actual submissions are coming in this week, and we will be meeting in the next 2 weeks and determining by July, I want to say July 3rd, which is a short time framework, who we would recommend to the MSBA. We have to get it in by July 3rd to be eligible for their August meeting. They need a month beforehand. So that happened with Pierce. The high school, everybody knows we delayed the request for more money until November, and it's moving along. I mean, I see people parked outside, working, and so that's a good sign. But Susan,
I will say the good news is that we were managed. No, we really managed to take advantage of the first shutdown. I think people were very pleased about that, and we made a lot of progress. Made up a lot of time and a lot of money. So I think that's great. The only other thing with the high school project is the Davis Path footbridge. It got a little bit complicated, and I can give you all the back and forth, but after a number of different conversations with town administrator's office and Carla Benka and some folks in advisory, what's going to happen is it is coming down, and there was a reserve fund transfer for them to take it down. It's about $800,000 to take it down ASAP because they're worried about crumbling. We have made it we put this on as fast a track as possible. However, it probably is not going to be done before the kind of November, December timeframe, according to Andy Papasturgeon. So I think, but the good news is that there's now money that's being put aside for it in the CIP. So I think there's sort of a timing question of how quickly we can get that up. But again, the implication of that for us is that we've got ninth graders who, are using that footbridge on a daily basis. They're not going past the 22 Tappan construction site, and they're not going down very, very narrow sidewalks, like 5-foot sidewalks or something on Route 9. So it's a top priority for Anthony and Hal to make sure. It's just an important piece of the safety plan to get kids back and forth. And the good news is we're probably not sending quite as many kids back and forth in September, but I do expect that there's going to have to be increased police detail presence. So anyway, this has been a big topic of conversation, and I think it's going as fast as it can, but there is still going to be an implication for the fall. And I'm grateful with the advisory committee partners for helping us, find the money for that in a CIP that doesn't have much money. Helen, the only other thing before I get to Driscoll is, do you want to say anything about the Classroom Capacity Fund, which has kind of gone through some changes and will be, I don't know if people want to hear it, but it's relevant to us.
I'm certainly happy to do that. So as many of you know, or in some you may not know, but I'm sure Mariah does, the advisory committee, Melissa Goff recommended to the advisory committee last year to pre-fund, due to the fact that we had a significant amount of free cash, to pre-fund the rentals for about 4.5, maybe 5 years of the rental agreements. So that meant there was like $6 million for this year in classroom capacity. For those who haven't been on the school committee, the capital issue with classroom capacity was that for years we were adding classrooms within schools to get more classrooms, classroom capacity, because of our increased population. We got to the point where there was no place to add capacity. So BEEP started to move out of the elementary schools. We had them in a class or two in every school, and we had to rent spaces. So we have been renting spaces at 2 temples for at least 4 or 5 years, I would say at this point. And at Maimonides, we rented last year. So Melissa felt this made sense to fund all this in the year when there is the cash, and then pay it out over the years. We wouldn't pay for it all up front, but that the funding would go throughout that time. Due to everything that's happened with our budget, with the town's budget, etc., we're going back to the way we always did business and funding it from year to year, the way we've always funded it, and to be able to pay the classroom capacity, thereby freeing up some of that cash, which was real cash, to pay for the bridge that you're talking about, to possibly use for operating. I can't remember exactly how they divided up what the monies were going to be used for, but they will be available to the town for use and to the schools. Does that make sense to people who haven't been involved? If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. So that's that piece. Do you want to talk about the Driscoll School?
Yeah, I want to give folks a heads up that next week at the Driscoll School Building Committee, we're going to talk about different scenarios around the project given COVID. There are a variety of costs and educational and sort of timeline implications to the schedule that we've put together. And there was a significant interest on the building commission of looking at a schedule where we did not do early bid packages the way we do with other construction manager at risk projects, but did one bid package and we did it a little bit later. If we did it a little bit later, we have to sort of look at what the cost would be. Would it be higher? Would it be lower? There's especially if people think that there's a downward trend in the bidding market, there's some advantage to moving it a bit later. At the same time, there are offsets there in terms of cost. If carry costs to kind of keep the whole project going, keep the owner's project manager going, keep the construction manager going. So there's an offset in terms of increases if we delay it. The other piece though to consider is how long the fence is up, and there's a lot of public interest in how long the playground is offline, and especially this fall, given that the fences were supposed to go up in the September-October timeframe. To the extent that we really do need outdoor space, and we can't smush kids into a small parking lot for in September, October, and we do want them to get out of the building. There may be benefit for us in terms of putting the fences up a little bit later, but it also means that then we move in later on the back end. So all these different things, there are a number of different considerations in terms of cost, schedule, COVID. And so what's going to happen is there's going to be a preview of this next week at the building committee meeting. So I just wanted you guys to have the heads up. And then there'll be a lot more information that comes in terms of the bidding and in terms of some market studies that they're commissioning to try to figure out where the market is going. But I just want to make folks aware that if a change in schedule is on the horizon, it will probably happen pretty quickly this summer. And people don't tend to like summer decisions on important things like delaying capital projects. So number one, I want to make sure number two, we're going to make sure the committee knows next week. But we will have an opportunity to talk about it because I assume we're meeting over the summer. It's probably the third, fourth week in July that this would come to us, given all of their scheduling. But I just want to flag that in people's minds to kind of pay attention, and we'll have to do some communication about it so that people again aren't surprised, because that the window is fairly small to make a shift. So I'm happy to answer any questions. There's like 4 more days of detail, but
just to add to that, if I might, I mean, the differences between finishing in January and having a move in January, February, or using the summer basically to move in September.
Right. So if we move in January, the middle of that last year, versus move in September, so it's kind of another winter in the building, which makes Charlie Simmons nervous about the boiler and but it's essentially that entire term would be in the old building, not the new building. That's right.
Just really quickly, you mentioned communication, and I just wondered if the whole Driscoll school community and surrounding community will get notice that there might be a possible important meeting this summer, so that they would sort of have a heads up if they wanted to tune in. Okay.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten that far. I think I was just more focused on we've got to get this in front of the building committee next week because and doing a lot of work fairly quickly so we could gussy this up and put some lipstick on it, so that next week we could at least explain this to the building committee. But yes, absolutely, that is going to have to happen. Otherwise, people will be unhappy.
But yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but if it's possible to do before the end of school, I think that would be beneficial. The heads up letter before people leave for summer. Just otherwise, I'm just worried it won't be on people's radar, and then we're going to be looking for it. So even if it's just a really quick heads up, I know it's really short, but I think if we could do it, it would be.
Susan, isn't there supposed to be a community meeting on the 23rd, which wasn't a good night? I mean, there was projects.
No. There was supposed to be a Driscoll community meeting on the 23rd, but the problem with that was that it was the night of town meeting. Right. So it got postponed somewhat indefinitely, although there was a discussion of having it in July. The problem with having it in July is that we will not yet have the answer to this question. So what I've been sort of pushing for is trying to say, when will we have enough information to be able to make this decision? And to Jennifer's point, can we try to get the community meeting on the calendar for that window, or it's going to be about a 2-week window at the middle to end of July. So can we at least try to get the community meeting to happen then? Anyway, even if people are on the Cape, they might be dialing into Zoom at this point, but because I think it's one of those things that people will want to dial into. But yes, it's a good point about communication.
Okay, Helen, are we done with capital?
Yeah, that's all I have.
Okay, David on policy.
All right, so the policy subcommittee last met this past Monday, the 15th. Our two major discussion items. First, we talked about student admission policies, in particular for non-residents. This has become an issue in both in recent weeks and months. In terms of recent months, around the Hancock Village relocations of many families to the West Roxbury side. And then in terms of the most recent past, in the context of furloughed and RIFT employees who expressed an interest in potentially being able to keep their children in the schools while they remain in limbo. So we had a discussion on both of those issues. It seems that for now, we think that these matters could be resolved outside of policy changes, but we're certainly open to having further discussions about both. There was not a lot of public participation in that first discussion, even though we did docket for public input. The second major area we discussed is a revision to our fiscal management policies, Section D of the policy handbook. We had 4 members of BFAC who came on as panelists and participated. They provided a framework and sort of a philosophical approach for the ways in which they would like to see us look at our policies. Subcommittee members expressed a desire to look to the MASC so that we can first update our policies in line with any statutory changes that have taken place since the last time our policies were revised. And by the way, some of those policies have not been touched in literally over 30 years. So it does need to be updated to match current practices and to make sure that we're in line with other districts. Sharon has been extremely helpful in looking up what peer districts have done, such as Newton and Lexington. She's provided me with copies of their policies. So that's something that we will continue to look at moving forward. I've also had conversations with Susan, Chair of Finance, about how to proceed in terms of looking at some of these policies from a BFAC perspective. Obviously, that's not the only perspective, but I think that we want to be respectful to members of our community and those who have a particular expertise in finance. Some members of BFAC offered a very hands-on voluntary role in terms of actually crafting some of these policies with us as part of some kind of task force. We're not there yet, but that was just something that they offered. And I always like to see, whether it's BFAC or any group in the community, that type of public interest and desire to work with us. So that's something that we will keep in mind moving forward.
Thank you. Any additional liaisons or updates? Barbara?
We, excuse me, we will be having a curriculum meeting on, I'm sorry, Tuesday, the 23rd at 10 in the morning. Most of our time will be spent hearing about professional development and where it lives, who pays for it, et cetera, et cetera. This was something that Susan had mentioned at the meeting at one point. Just, we're not really trying to change professional development at this point. We just want to know where it is, who controls it, what its purposes are. So that will be the main focus of the meeting. We will also go back to the Student Opportunities Act and follow through with that a bit.
Oh, thank you. Anyone else? Helen?
So I have an update on the, I'm the early childhood liaison, and on Monday night, the BPTO sponsored a question and answer with myself and Dr. Watts and Aaron Herney to talk about what people will look like in the fall, to answer parents, mostly to answer parents' questions. And Dr. Watts and Ms. Herney did a wonderful job. I chimed in occasionally. But what really impressed me was the the questions that people asked, the respectfulness, and the kindness that they had in this meeting. It was really a pleasure to be part of the meeting. There's a FAQ that's going to be, if it's not up already, it will be up on the BEEP PTO website and also on the BEEP site, which can be accessed through our website, talking about the decisions that have been made about who will be able to attend in the fall, and sort of keeping people abreast of changes that might be happening in policy through the state and how that might affect BEEP. So that it was a very, very good meeting on Monday night.
Good, thank you. Any new business? Moving on to new business. Okay, so we're going into executive session. I propose a motion to meet in executive session pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 21A for the following purposes. Purpose 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, non-aligned personnel. Purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the Brookline Educators Union, Unit A, Unit B, and paraprofessionals. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. And purpose 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. Temple Ojai Shalom, 1187 Beacon Street, Brookline, Maimonides School, 2 Clark Road, Brookline, and Temple Amos, 194 Grove Street in Chestnut Hill, Brookline. And I so declare. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you. I think we need a roll call to go into executive session. Helen?
Yes.
Susan?
Oh, you may want to tell people to be coming out.
Oh, we will be coming back into open session, actually, when we are done. Susan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And as I said, we will be coming back for a short meeting afterwards.
Suzanne, can I just say one quick thing?
Sure.
So it strikes me that, all joking aside, this is Mr. Lenis's last official school committee meeting with us, full school committee meeting with us, I think, unless we're going to have another one.
Well, that's why I was stalling until we knew for sure we weren't having one.
So be clear on how I feel about another one, or do you guys have that?
Go ahead, Susan.
I just wanted to express our gratitude for just it was like a batting practice. You just kept swinging the bat. Pitches kept coming, and you just kept swinging the bat. And that will be my memory of you, continuing to just swing the bat day after day with so much going on, and just really sticking with it. Early mornings, late nights, and just thank you, Ben. Just thank you for all the time and effort you put in, and so much heart that you put in also. We're very grateful.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much. It has been quite a year for all of us, and a great run here in Brookline. And early in the year, people asked me how I was doing, and I said, "Well, I'm still standing," and that was like October, right? Well, I know what was to come, but I do appreciate what you said, Susan, just about keep on showing up. I think that's a lot of what it took this year for all of us, just to keep on showing up. I will not forget Brookline soon. It's imprinted on my brain, and nor do I want to. So I've worked with so many great people. The principals that you have, the leadership team here, so many teachers. But I mean, I really work closely, as you know, with all of you and the principals, and it's a great team. I think characterized by incredible passion, incredible commitment, and incredible talent. And so I wish all of you the best. I hope it'll be a little bit easier for all of us wherever we are next year. Especially hope it'll be easier for me next year, but also for Brookline too. I hope we learned a lot this year in terms of how to do remote learning. I hope it leads to more consistency and stronger across the whole better strength across the whole system. And I also hope it leads to just working together in a collaborative and productive way. I know you're in good hands with Dr. Marini. As folks know, he's a good friend of mine, has been a tremendous support of mine, and just a great ally of mine this year. And you could not have picked better. So that's great news. And I do wish you also shorter meetings for all of you. But, thank you very much.
Barbara?
Excuse me, I would like to thank you, Ben, for your good nature. You frequently had a smile on your face when I felt like I was grinding my teeth. You just managed to put up with all of us in a way that was amazing for meetings that were endless. And you had a smile on your face. And that is really something that I have been grateful for because, as I said, I'm sometimes feeling very grumpy sitting here, particularly as it gets to be late at night. So thank you very much and good luck in Gloucester.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Really appreciate that a lot.
I also want to just, do you want to go ahead?
Go ahead.
I'll just say quick. I'm going to be very quick. I just want to wish you all the best in Gloucester. I think this has been extremely difficult year for all of us, and we came through it. So that's the important part, and I wish you well.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to just say thank you you're just such a hard worker, Ben. I really appreciate all the hours, my goodness, and you were so available when we needed something. You'd respond, return those phone calls, return that text. And I did really enjoy working on those docket meetings with you and Julie. I mean, I know we went head to head, but with all three of us. But they were good conversations, and I thought that I really got to know what you were thinking, and Julie, of course. And I want to thank you for the really hard work, and you stepped up. We needed somebody in July, and you stepped up for us. So thank you for doing that.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. I think those are some hard meetings, but that was because people who really feel are really passionately, but also deeply, but also about very important matters. And I hope I always did that respectfully, or at least almost all the time did it respectfully. You certainly do. So yeah, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that.
Jennifer?
I also like to commend you, Ben, for your indefatigable work ethic. You really put in the time. That's very clear. And also, I greatly appreciate that whenever any of us had questions, or certainly whenever I asked you questions, you're always available and willing to provide an in-depth response. And that was always very helpful. And I think those skills are going to serve you very well in Gloucester. So best of luck there.
Great. Thank you.
Well, I don't know what else to say, Ben, because they said it all. So I guess I'll say thank you. Thank you for stepping up when we needed somebody. Really appreciate that. And I wish you all the best.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go into executive session. We will come back out for a few minutes afterwards, an open session. So, Robin, do we need to go anywhere, or we can stay?
You can stay on this meeting, and then as soon as Brookline Interactive is done, then start right up.
Okay, we're back live in open session. I think we have a couple of motions we need to vote on. So Helen, would you like to do the honors?
Sure. I'd like to make a motion to authorize the chair to execute 3 lease amendments, one with Temple Ove Shalom, one with Temple Emeth, and one with Maimonides.
We have a second?
For the 2021 school year.
Second the motion.
Thank you. I think we'll go for a vote, straight for a vote. That's okay.
Yes.
Okay, Helen.
Yes.
Susan.
She may
Yes.
be disposed.
No, I'm here. I'm here. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. David?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Sharon?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, thank you. We have one more. Andy, do you want to do that one? You haven't tried?
Sure. I don't know how to word the motion exactly, though.
Just say I move to approve, I think.
So I move to approve the memorandum of agreement between us and the BEU regarding extension of the deadline for notifying paraprofessionals of layoffs and non-renewals.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mariah. Ready to vote? Helen?
Yes.
Susan? David?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Sharon?
Sure.
Barbara?
Yes.
And I vote yes, that's unanimous. Okay, folks, I move that we adjourn. Is that okay?
When is our next meeting, just?
Oh, we don't actually have it set. Because we had to do the doodle poll.
Yeah.
We're leaning towards like the 8th or the 9th of July, but that won't be the workshop because Jennifer can't make that date.
I can't make that date either.
Okay. But we felt it was important to have a meeting that week.
Okay. I can't make the 8th, just so you know. Okay.
I think July 7th worked for everyone except for Jennifer.
Sorry, I have to pull out on the 7th.
How
But,
about the 9th?
you know, go ahead, have fun.
Sharon, does the 9th work for you? Does the 9th work?
No, I think I'm going to be tied up until the 10th.
How about others for the 9th? Can you make the 9th, Helen?
Yeah.
I can do it before 4 o'clock. I have something started. I have an evening event starting at 4.
Oh, so you're not on the 9th.
Well, if we're not going to have Jennifer or Sharon anyway, then we might as well. The 7th works for everybody. Should we go back to that?
Yeah, the evening of the 7th is fine.
All right. So why don't we just go ahead with the 7th?
Yeah.
7th is fine.
And I will send around a note to finance in particular to try to get a finance meeting for next week to talk about. We may as well do the food services piece and the fees. See what we can, if there's any of those that we can pull out, and if there's interest, we may be able to. Ben, if you want, pick up this conversation, the last conversation. If you want me to tack on an executive session to it.
I'm unavailable from Wednesday onwards.
Okay.
Okay, so, and we're really close to saying this could be your last school committee meeting.
Like the suspense is killing me.
Well, we already said our thank yous and goodbyes.
Yes, anyway, just let me know.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Good
folks.
night. Thank you for the hard work tonight. Thank you.